Good evening, and welcome to the September 14th meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 3 committee meetings tonight. We have the Police Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Building and Planning Committee. But before we begin this evening, I'd like to ask you all to join me in a moment of silence in memory of Maki San Miguel Paulson, an active member of our Environmental Advisory Council who passed away recently. Maki was a valued and enthusiastic member of our EAC and the sustainability planning team. Her professional expertise in sustainable building practices was invaluable, and she was a passionate and dedicated advocate for stronger, more environmentally responsible buildings and building practices in the township. She will be greatly missed. Please join me in rising for a moment of silence. Thank you. So now we turn to the business of the Board of Commissioners this evening. We start with the Police Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have 3 items on the Police Committee agenda tonight. I'm going to handle the first 2, and then I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner McKeon for his handling of the 3rd item. So with us tonight is Superintendent McGrath, who's going to give us a presentation on both items.
Certainly. So the first item is a authorization to run an entry-level testing for probation police officers. It may seem like deja vu because this is the second time this year we're requesting this. The last one we ran back in the spring had the same results as the one we had last fall. We had 54 people pass the written test and 17 passed all the processes for consideration to be hired. Since last December, we've hired 7 people off the list we have, and the current 17 that we're looking at are going through the process. They will not fill the full 14 open positions we currently have. So in order to be able to hire anybody going into 2023, we need to run another test, which is now tentatively scheduled with your approval and civil service to be on November 12th. So we are requesting authorization to move forward with an entry-level test.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any Commissioner questions or comments? My only comment is this is, go ahead, Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. Superintendent McGrath, this time next year, how many vacancies do you anticipate? I know that there are always retirements, but I mean, are we, with our current hires, is that going to help us, or are we going to have more vacancies?
Well, there are currently 14 additional people eligible to retire. Now, there's always people eligible to retire, don't necessarily retire when on their date of eligibility. There will be some in the early part of next year, so that'll increase that total number. But that'll be offset by whoever we hire out of this current group of 17.
Well, yeah, I'm not asking you to pull down, but we budget for 136 police officers, and we've been down by 11. That's what we were dealing with last year. Are we, if you look into a crystal ball, how many, what is going to be our complement of police officers this time?
Well, again, we will hire out of this current group before the end of the year, going into January. So that will offset some of the 14. We'll have to wait and see what that number is.
Yeah, okay.
Typically, in the beginning of the year, you'll have 3 or 4 retirements off the bat, and then it's kind of a wait and see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Any other Commissioner comments or questions? I'm going to put in the form of a motion that we consider for recommendation the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Civil Service Commission to conduct competitive examinations to establish an eligibility list for the position of probationary police officer. Second, Vice President Gladwyne, thank you. Jody, is there anybody online? Okay. I think this is an easy decision. It's something we need to do on a regular basis, so I would urge all of us to support it. With that in mind, all those in favor, please raise their hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, it passes unanimously. Superintendent, if we could have the briefing on the next item, which is also relating to competitive examinations.
It is. It's for a request for examination for the position of captain. So as part of those 14 positions that are open, recently a long-standing captain of the police department, Frank Thomas, who served this community for 35 years, retired. There is no current valid certified list for captain. The last test was given in 2016. Civil service list can only remain for any level open for 2 years. This position's been open since the end of August, so we are asking for your approval to have civil service run a test for the position of captain.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any commissioner comments, questions? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. How long would it be before you would be able to hire, best possible scenario and have that person, be working in the field?
The captain position,
Yes.
filling out both lieutenant and captain promotional testing will take place in late October, early November.
And so a selection process could be as soon as when?
Sometime in November.
And then is there a training period? I'm just trying to find out
Sure.
when this case scenario and when we would have a new captain.
Well, any promotional position has a probationary period of 12 months. So they're constantly being oriented and moving into their new promoted position, learning as they're going along.
So by hopefully beginning of next year, we would at least have a probationary captain.
I would hope so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. I'm going to put this out as a motion that we consider for recommendation the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Civil Service Commission to conduct a competitive examination to establish an eligibility list for the position of captain of police. Have a second? Thank you, Vice President Cabron. Jody, I take it nobody's online for this?
No one has their hand raised.
Great, thank you. So I'll call the vote. All those,
Chairman, before
I'm
you
sorry,
call the vote,
Commissioner
may I
Stingson.
ask a question to the superintendent, please?
Sure, certainly.
Thank you. Superintendent, for captains, lieutenants, are all those positions always internal? Is there opportunity for an external if we deem necessary opportunities?
Under civil service regulations, they're all internal, yes.
All internal. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree. With that, anybody else? With that in mind, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise their hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. And President Sinai, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner McKeon for the handling of the third item on the Police Committee agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. The final item is the appointment to the Lower Merion Police Pension Association. So I'm going to move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners the appointment of Commissioner David McComb to the Lower Merion Police Pension Association, a private pension program for Lower Merion Township police officers for a 3-year term, such term to expire September 2025. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. And I'll just point out so that everyone knows, the Lower Merion Police Pension Association is a nonprofit organization that administers and provides a private pension to our police officers. Historically, the Board of Commissioners has appointed the chair of the Police Committee to serve on the board of the organization. So that's essentially why this is before us. Commissioner Zeloff had handled it previously, and now that Commissioner McComb is the head of the Police Committee, we're seeking to make this change. We had one question that came in. They wanted to know, the Lower Merion Police Pension Association is a private pension program. Why is this recommendation to the Board of Commissioners necessary? And that's necessary because the bylaws of the Lower Merion Police Pension Association require one member of the Board of Trustees to be appointed by the Board of Commissioners. So with that, are there any, Commissioner Zeloff?
Thanks, Commissioner McKeon. Just to expand slightly on this very unique plan, it is not taxpayer funded whatsoever. It is all voluntary contributions from residents and businesses in Lower Merion Township that are solicited annually, and the plan has a long history. In fact, it precedes our taxpayer-funded pension plan, which is a sizable plan. And this is, so there's a long history in this township of recognizing police for their service before there were publicly funded pension plans. And this plan, is got significant assets and is well managed and does provide supplemental insurance to our police force upon separation from the department. So, thank you, Commissioner McKeon.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? There's no one in the room. Jody, is there anyone online? I know Commissioner McComb has a cult following in southeastern Pennsylvania, so I don't know, maybe some of his groupies want to chime in.
There's no one.
There's no one. Okay. All right.
More people online, but no one would go.
Fair enough. All right, so with that, we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and any opposed? And anyone abstaining? Okay. So, Madam Secretary, it passes unanimously with Commissioner McComb abstaining. With that, President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Police Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon, and thank you, Commissioner McComb, and congratulations. And with that, we turn to the Finance Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Zoff.
With that, I have a point of order, if I may.
Yeah.
Can I thank the President for commencing the committee?
Please. Thank you.
Proceed.
All right. So before we begin the Finance Committee, I wanted to let everybody know about a motion that I intend to make in connection with the committee this evening at the end. I bring this forth right now so that you'll have some time to reflect upon it, but once I explain it, I think it'll all make sense, or at least I hope it will to everybody. One of the items we have on tonight is the approval for the additional staff in connection with the parking service. And that came out of our budget workshop where there was the explanation of the immediate need. That wasn't the only personnel immediate need that we discussed the evening. We also discussed about 3 new positions for public works in reference to refuse and recycling. In particular, 1 full-time driver and 2 full-time laborers. And our director of public works, Paul McElhaney, explained to us the juggling that he has been doing with personnel and why he needed these positions filled. You may recollect I asked a series of questions about how long does it take to fill this position. And at breakneck speed, it was indicated it could take 4 to 6 weeks to go ahead and recruit, to go through the interview process, and find people to fulfill what is an immediate need now. So I was probably remiss in not making sure that while I believe, and you all have an opportunity to correct me if I'm wrong, that while I believe the board supported hiring these people, to make sure it was on an item for us this evening to move forward immediately. Since it's not on our published agenda, we are permitted to amend that agenda according to our code if we have a majority +1. So at the conclusion of those items which are on the list this evening, I'm going to make the motion that we include this item on the list. I'll give the particulars that we received during the budget workshop of what the cost value would be to add these people on there. And then at that time, we'll have the opportunity to debate whether to do it now or not. But I did wish to bring that to your attention on the front end of the Finance Committee. Thank you very much.
And with that commercial interruption, we will return to our normally scheduled programming. The first item on the agenda for the Finance Committee, first of the 4 items, is for the committee to consider awarding a contract for tree removal. Our Chief Financial Officer is going to present to us, and he's going to do so via Zoom.
Good evening. So, this item, there are 34 trees to be removed. For those of you concerned about tree removals, there will be a tree planting contract coming to you, I believe, in November, which will be at least double, maybe even triple the amount of trees to be removed. This is a known vendor. We had 8 bids. The cost per tree removed is really close. It's within $2 of the cost per tree removed of the prior year's contract, and we recommend moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. Eric, do you or does anybody else in management know what is the general schedule or anticipated conclusion of the work? Because I know that there are some items on this list about which I am asked, and I suspect that's the case with other commissioners as well. So Eric or Ernie, do you know the answer to that?
would say just generally that, if contract is approved by the board next week, generally it takes 2 to 3 weeks for the contract to be executed, and then there's a notice to proceed. So I would assume by mid-October, the contractor would have the ability to go ahead and move forward. If there are specific trees of which are a concern and those haven't been communicated to the shade tree to maybe be prioritized for removal first, I'm sure that they would consider that unless the manager has anything else to add.
Okay, then I would ask, I'll ask Eric if you would find out from Shade Tree or from Public Works, when's the anticipated completion of the work, and if that can be reported to us subsequently. I would also note that Jimmy's Tree Landscape Contractors has done work for the township, and so I imagine that they are considered a reliable contractor. So, do committee members have any questions or comments for Eric or Ernie? Seeing none, does a member of the public have any questions or comments? Jody, there are no one else on Zoom would have any questions or comments. So I will move that the committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a contract for dead and diseased tree removal to Jimmy's Tree Landscape Contractors, LLC, based on bids received Thursday, August 18th, 2022, and with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and approval of the Director of Public Works in the amount of $89,500. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb seconds. Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed or abstaining, so indicate. Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. I think I did ask for questions and comments from committee members. Okay. The next item is not for action, but is a report from our Chief Financial Officer on the financial condition and forecast of our solid waste fund, otherwise known as the fund that provides refuse and recycling collection to residential properties in the township. Eric?
Thank you. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. And, spoiler alert, we're not recommending any fee increase. The solid waste fund's financials and fundamentals really haven't changed that much, except for the commodity markets, which has been a significant change. Dollars saved and earned from increased revenue from paper and decreased costs from commingled recycling equal about a 4% fee increase compared to the 2019 commodity values. So, that's been very positive. So without further ado, the solid waste fund, it is an enterprise fund. Our township financial policy calls for trying to maintain a 10% fund balance of expenditures. I had a long back and forth, mostly me, with Commissioner Courtney, who asked a question about the GFOA's policy earlier this afternoon, which led me to uncover that the GFOA policy has actually changed. And to be blunt, their policy really doesn't really make sense in terms of the way the township operates its solid waste fund. So I think that, the comment that's there has proven to be a little bit outdated. But in general, I'm still confident and comfortable with the policy as adopted in the township's financial policies. And you just see some statistics about trash and numbers related to recycling. In terms of the fee history, this is a 10-plus year fee history. You can see that usually on average every 2 to 3 years, there's some sort of a fee adjustment that's been made. And of course, the fees were restructured to a 3-tier system back in 2021. Overall, on the subscriptions, this looks at where subscriptions are August this year versus August the previous year. Again, about 90% of the subscriptions are at the mini-can and standard level, part of a multi-year trend, which you can see more on this slide here. Residents continue to transition to tier levels. You can see the changes you have here, and rear yard continues year over year to decline slightly on a percentage basis, but when you look at it in the aggregate over the 10-plus years, it is fairly significant. Again, there's clearly environmental benefits to us in terms of having less trash out there and hopefully paying for less tonnage. However, this does make it more difficult to balance the fund because whether or not someone has 10 pounds or 100 pounds of trash, trucks still need to roll out and still need to be staffed and things of that nature. When you look at the solid waste fund's revenues, absent fee increases, generally, we don't see a lot of changes. What we have seen a little bit this year is we have seen a rebound in kind of some small categories. Interest income, since interest rates have been rising again, has risen substantially. And our PMIC refund revenue is higher in 2022 than we anticipated. Same story that we had in the general fund when we discussed that in July. The big number that you see below is in the recycled paper market. So again, since really the pandemic, the recycled paper markets have totally switched on their head, and that's provided a huge revenue boost to the township. And, so there is some value in all those Amazon boxes and such that you might see around your neighborhood. The only other thing I'm just going to kind of mention to the board, it's not a fee that needs to be approved by the board, but we are planning to change the special pickup fee in 2023. We haven't changed that in about 5 years. It's currently $30 for 3 items. We're going to raise that to $40 for 3 items in 2023. That's still cheaper on a per item basis than all of our neighboring townships, which provide similar service, but we think it is time and something that we're going to continue to adjust regularly as the cost of service increases. When you look at the expenditures, the tipping fee, that's the cost that you pay for the trash. Obviously, when we spoke last fall, when we renewed that contract, we had a substantial increase. Commingled costs, those have dropped precipitously. So we used to be paying $200,000 to $300,000 a year for commingled hauling. And now, the numbers keep coming in really low. We might even be at 50,000 by the end of 2022. Obviously, labor is costly because there are a good amount of people that are out there every day. Vehicle rental rates, those trucks are expensive. So that's a significant aspect. And then the general fund indirect costs, that's for the centralized services, mainly finance, IT, human resources that help and support solid waste, whether it's processing payroll and AP, helping recruit and retain employees. So as an enterprise fund, it needs to cover all of its costs. You can see the progress here on this slide in terms of the overall reductions in waste over year. Obviously, the outlier year being the main COVID year of 2020, when people were stuck at home and probably a lot of people were cleaning out their basements or attics or other such things. You do see the blue line is the cost. Now, the reason the cost goes up, even though the refuse tonnage is going down in 22, is on that last slide, that large increase in the per ton expense. This slide, I'll just spend a little bit of time on. It is a little busy. The red line is the trash rate that we pay per ton. The blue line is the commingled rate we pay per ton. So when the blue line is above the red line, historically, that's when we actually, the cost of recycling commingled recyclables is actually more than the cost to get rid of trash. So thankfully, we haven't had too many of those days. And you can see it actually goes off the chart right now. We are thinking, at least as much as we can look in a crystal ball, that we think that the commingled will have a cost again going forward. But hopefully that stays as minimal as possible. The green line, which goes over to the right-hand side, is the cost, or excuse me, the revenue that we receive per ton for paper. So you can see that was pretty low late 2018 through 2019. 2020, it started to rise and really increased a lot in 2021. So that's been real positive for us. So in terms of the actual finances, you see a couple year history here, the forecast for 2022 and the projection for 2023. So overall, we are at just above that 10% fund balance level. So we do not have a recommended fee increase for this year. The projections, you can see an increase from the forecast for 2022 to the projection for 2023 and the expenditures. That's mainly made up of increases anticipated for personnel, increases, 3% increase in the hauling rate, and then we are anticipating an increase rather significantly in the equipment fund rental fee just because of the increased cost of parts maintenance, and fuel. I am comfortable with this number, even with the cost of the new crews. I wasn't aware of Commissioner Bernheim's potential motion, although I don't think that would have a significant financial impact on these. Maybe more than 10.3 turns to 10.18 or something of that nature. And then finally, in terms of next steps, if we're not increasing the fees, there's no other public action that has to take place by the board. We do have some unknowns going forward in those future labor costs and on how the commodity markets go. But again, I feel comfortable where we are, at least for the next year. The only other piece I want to touch on is the second to final bullet. Annually in November, we send out a letter to residents. It's a subscription notice, and there's basically a bottom piece of a letter which residents, if they want to make a change, can send that in to us. So, in general, we revise this letter each year, and last year I really made an effort to try to make, as long as someone read the first paragraph of the letter, they would understand that they don't have to turn this in if they don't want to make any sort of change. There's an auto renewal. We sent over 16,300 letters last year, received almost 1,230 letters. So a response rate about 7.5% in the mail. Of those, 2/3 of people basically said, I want to keep the same level of service. So there was really no reason for them to send in that form. Another 360 or so people responded via our website form, and that it was the reverse. 2/3 of those people actually had a change to make, 1/3 of them did not. We've even, honestly, just within the last few weeks, still gotten some change forms from November that have been mailed into us. Again, indicating no change, but maybe someone found it in a file and said, oh, I need to change, I need to send this in. My suggestion is I'd like, in years where we do not have a fee increase, to change to a postcard mailing. This has benefits both financially and environmentally, from kind of a two shades of green. From a finance perspective, it's going to be less costly and cost less than postage to send out this mailing via postcard. Environmentally, we're not sending out a piece of paper, a return envelope, and a cover envelope. And generally, my goal is hopefully that people will understand that there is no need for them to take an action if they don't want to make a change. The postcard will still provide information in terms of what is your subscription level. If you do not want to make a change, you do not have to do anything. It will still provide a phone number, an email, and a website if people want to make changes. But that's something I really think we should consider. It does take significant staff time to go through all of those mailings, categorize them and such. So I think it would be an improvement to our process, save us a little bit of money, and save some trees in the same respect. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Eric, thank you very much for that very thorough presentation. It's very good news that you've presented to us our simplified 3-tier system of pricing that's in its second year. Appears to be working extremely well. The fund balance is going up, and thank you for your plan to improve efficiency as well as to reduce the amount of paper that's in the mail. And also, you'll receive less mail in September that has gone out in the prior November. Our use pickup fee is a bargain, and with the increase that you are planning to implement, it will be a bargain. So with that, do any committee members have any questions or comments? Commissioner Grimes.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Zella. Eric, and Commissioner Zella, I think, just mentioned this also. With the special pickup fee, which I think you said was about $30 or $40, does that make up the township's cost to do those pickups? Do you know that?
We analyzed this, I think it was, again, I don't recall if it was 4 or 5 years ago, and we thought it was just about breaking even at $30 at that point. I haven't done a full analysis of that. The revenue from it, honestly, you would probably, that half an hour of my time and a half an hour of Mr. McElhaney's time looking at that administratively would probably be more than any additional revenue you might get from adjusting it from $30 to $45. It's a huge revenue raiser, but we think that doing these periodic adjustments makes sense, especially in light of, we know what the wage increases have been for our residents and what are our collection costs. So we do plan to do more regular fee increases to this fee as we go forward. Just as last year, we actually did increase the fee at the transfer station if you brought in extra waste during the week from 10 cents to 12 cents because we had such a large jump in the tipping fee with Covanta. But we will continue to look at these and analyze these as we move forward.
So, yeah, thank you. I mean, and I hope you'll do that. I'm a little taken aback by your statement about your costs to research that, because I don't think that's really a part of what we do. But having said that, I think that we are I do recall when we discussed this a few years ago, I think the township is a bargain compared to the private providers that provide this service. And I look forward to a discussion at a later time, because I think that we should be competitive, more competitive with the private providers, and not necessarily be far and away the best bargain in town on this. So thank you, and thank you, Chairman Zeloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. Eric, probably in fairness, I should have sent this question to you in advance, but when we first discussed the rates for the mini can, Commissioner Courtney was an advocate of keeping that low, under the theory that the lower it is, that will then encourage people, in order to save money, to possibly change their habits for the use of trash and maybe use less. Those, such as myself, which may not have been as kind to our residents as should have been, I thought, well, that just may encourage people to stuff more into the mini can, and that it would not affect, really disposable habits. One of the metrics that may shed light on this is the actual tonnage of trash, which from the chart looks like it went down, but I can't tell how much, but ever so slightly. A, I don't know if you have those actual numbers, and B, whether you can tie that to the mini can rate or not, such that, if Commissioner Courtney is correct, maybe we lower that rate. So anyway, I just don't know if you have any data that sheds any information that one way or the other, and if you want to take time to get back to us on that, that's okay too.
I'll just say that the tonnage that we report is overall township tonnage. We have no way of tracking tonnage by someone's subscription level, because we do not measure cans when we pick them up. We could, for the 2 years we've been on the tiered system, try to assign a value and try to do some sort of calculation, but it would be difficult. The other thing I would just always encourage our residents, especially those people who are subscribing to the mini can, is to again understand that if you have a mini can, that means a 20-gallon can only. We deal with residents throughout the year who believe they have mini cans and have 31, 30, 32-gallon cans. That's not a mini can. And we will do enforcement and upgrade people who continually use a can that is not a 20-gallon can when they're subscribed to a mini can. So that's just a little public service announcement on that.
Fair enough. I had some use out of my question then developed. Thank you very much.
Yes, and hence the name Mini in front of the in front of the can. So, other questions, Commissioner Courtney?
Thank you, Commissioners. At first, I just wanted to say that the reason that our back and forths are so one-sided is because Eric's explanations are often comprehensive and leave me no room to pick at them. So that's the reason for that. And then just to sort of add my 2 cents to what Commissioner Bernheim was just saying, I think there is success in the change of our structure, and that more people are opting for lower levels of waste, and enforcement problems notwithstanding, I'm not sure that that's a huge issue. I look at these numbers in terms of tonnage. We take out 2020, it looks like relatively flat, maybe a little decrease, but I hope that it's great that we don't have a fee increase this year. I hope that in future years, if we do have to consider a fee increase, that we will continue to incentivize moving towards the lower waste levels. And even though that does somewhat reduce our revenues over the long run, and I hope that we don't reward positive behavior amongst our residents in terms of reducing waste with increases in fees to cover our costs, and that instead we find other ways to maintain this incentive and cover our costs, perhaps through shifting our services. Compost seems like a great example, since that's probably going to be a leading contributor to the reduction in our solid waste. Just wanted to weigh in there. Thank you very much, Eric. This is an excellent report. And thank you, Commissioner Zella.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney, and I believe that a pilot program for composting is coming. Is that correct, Ernie?
That is one of the board's objectives, and also our sustainability director. So she is working on some plans for a pilot program in 2023.
Very good. Other committee members with questions or comments? Seeing none. Seeing Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you. I just have sort of a brief PSA on this. And as you can see from the presentation, we are getting so much more money back from our paper recycling, and I think that's fantastic. It was $364,000 in 2022 versus $49,000 in 2019. So if you break that down for the 17,000 or so subscriptions we have, that's a savings of about $20 per family. And this is a self-funded enterprise fund, so we get all the money back as a community through the recycling. So I say that because sometimes people ask, well, what can we recycle for paper? What exactly is it? That includes paper, books, newspaper, paper shopping bags, corrugated cardboard, Amazon boxes, cake and cereal boxes, and beer and soda cartons. So please, it benefits everybody to recycle as much paper as possible. I think recycling is always a great thing to do, but particularly now from a financial motive too, we get a lot more money back than we have. One last thing, please do not throw plastic bags in with your recycling. I know a lot of people take commingled out and they'll dump that in the trash, and that will get into the machines that sort everything, and you have to use like a hammer or a pickaxe to get that out. So I talked to a resident about 2 days ago who was still throwing plastic bags in the commingled, so please don't do that.
Thank you very much for that PSA, Commissioner McKeon. As Chair of Public Works, it's even more appropriate. So, with that, do any members of the public have any questions or comments, either in the room, Jody, or online? Okay, I will stop asking that.
There are people online, but no one has their hand raised.
Oh, good. All right, then I will continue to ask that. Thank you. Okay, that concludes this item, since it was for information and not for action by the committee. And thank you very much, Eric. Eric will go on to item 3, which is a discussion of considering changes to our ordinance for business registration regulations and associated fees, a topic that we rarely discuss. And so perhaps you can tell us more about it, Eric.
Yeah, so in general, we talk about our business taxes, and you know, they're significant to the township in terms of the amount of money that they provide overall to the township's general fund. The reason we don't talk about these often is because due to various legislation and court actions, there's not too much of a wiggle room for us to really change things. But we are proposing some changes here, and you have an issue briefing before you. I'm going to touch on a few things in relation to that to try to strengthen our enforcement capacity for business taxpayers who fail to file their business licenses or their annual business taxes. So historically, we'll send out a delinquent notice. We sent one out earlier on this August. Roughly about 50% of business tax accounts receive a delinquent notice. So that might seem very high. A lot of these are very small delinquencies. So like someone who missed one license year, or they closed out their business but didn't do a final return. A lot of them are very simple, but there are some more severe delinquents. So what we're trying to do is to try to find ways to more incentivize compliance. And there's a summary of the proposed ordinances, which I'll walk through, and then you have an ordinance document in front of you as well. So we want to add language to the township's codes, and it's through the various codes. There's a specific code for the local services tax, the $1 a week tax for anyone who works in the township, the mercantile tax, which is generally on wholesale, retail, and restaurants, and then also the business privilege tax, which is the tax on all other businesses. So in terms of, we want to add language to allow the township to refuse the issuance of a business license certificate if a business account is not in good standing. And why would we do that? If we have someone who we know has multiple delinquencies and multiple accounts, and they come into our office and are looking to open up a new account, if they fill out a form and give us $20, we have to give them a certificate. One of the things we realized through the pandemic and subsequently is these certificates have value. People use these to go out and get loans, PPP loans, get this, that. So there were people calling us a lot through the pandemic because they needed their certificates for these various things. And we will have people who will come through and will ask for a license, and next month they'll come through with another entity and ask for a license. So if that person does have delinquencies with us, we want to have a reason and an ability to say, hold on, there are these issues. You need to resolve these issues before we issue you another license. We also really do not have any good mechanism in terms of to incentivize that license payment. The license payment is only $20 a year, but currently the late fee payment follows the business tax code, which basically means there's a 10% penalty and then there's a set of interest. So if someone comes in and missed a payment, the fact that they're going to get a penalty and interest of like $2.13 or whatever, they're going to roll our eyes at us. And administratively, it's really never been something that has been enforced. So what we really want to do is add some teeth to this. So we want to add a penalty provision of $30 as a late fee per year as an administrative fee. We talked about different fee levels, trying to find kind of the Goldilocks, what's the right level. The late fee would only apply 60 days after an assessment that you owe the fee. So whether that's the annual license fee that you get in December or early January, or the delinquent mailing. The same thing is like if Commissioner Zeloff owns a rental property and we had him starting to use his rental property and gaining income from it in 2019, but then we discovered, oh no, he actually owned that rental property back to 2016. We're not going to necessarily talk about it publicly. We're not going to charge him a late fee for those 3 years because we had never invoiced him those years. Once we would send him an invoice, he would then be responsible as long as he paid within 60 days, he wouldn't have any late fee. So trying to provide an incentive, but also providing the stick to make sure that people are compliant. The other thing is we want to allow for the filing of civil code complaints in addition to the summary citations. The summary citations, we generally aren't a lot of times covering our costs. A lot of the court costs eat into this. So this is just another tool for us in certain circumstances that we believe will help us recover those court costs and any attorney's fees. Under the local services tax, we want to make clear in our code that if you are a local services taxpayer, that you need a business license, especially in light of the pandemic and how many people are working remotely. It's only common sense that if someone is paying us a local services tax, that they're engaged in some form of business and they need to have a license. And then finally, there are some miscellaneous changes to reflect, kind of correcting old incorrect due date. Also, through the pandemic and other things, we've had to change to the due date, and we've had to come to the board for like a quick resolution. We would like basically in the code, the ability to basically say we're going to match the federal individual income tax filing deadline without the need for actual action by the Board of Commissioners, and moving all these fees to where we centrally hold all the other fees in section A167 of the Township Code. So that's maybe not a brief, but hopefully a brief enough summary for you to give you a feeling and an overall sense of what we're trying to do here. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about specifics that you see in the issue briefing or in the ordinance.
Thank you very much, Eric, and everyone should know that this is a staff-initiated ordinance change, and so I thank you for doing that in an effort to improve our compliance and our compliance process. Also want to clarify for everybody, if you read the memo on ordinance, the word collector with a capital C is in there. The collector in this case is our chief financial officer. So the collector equals Eric. So that's important to clarify. And thank you, Eric, for explaining the 4 different categories of business taxes, right? We have the business privilege tax that has 2 components. It's the mercantile and then everybody else. slightly different tax rates. We have the local services tax, and we have everybody needing to have a business license who owns a business. So with that slight addition to Eric's thorough explanation, are there any questions or comments from committee members? Commissioner Kramer.
Eric,
Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
my only question on this is relates to Section 4, subsection B, and also Article 4, subsection B, where it allows you to impose a civil fine not to exceed $600 per violation. And I think that, if there are relatively small amounts that are delinquent, so say somebody is delinquent by $100, this would allow us to impose a $600 fee plus attorney's fees and costs on them. And I don't think that that's reasonable, and I think it should be revised to be $600 or 10% of the amount due, whichever is less.
Eric, would you like to respond? Did you hear that?
Yes, I mean, if the board wants to make that adjustment, I mean, the only thing I'm not clear on, Commissioner Kramer said, or 10% of the amount due.
Oh, the amounts,
Because we want to make sure we're recovering 100% of the amount due.
or 10% of the amount that's delinquent, whichever is less. So in other words,
Wouldn't we want to collect 100% of the amount that's delinquent?
no, I'm just talking about the amount of the civil fine,
Oh, okay. All right.
just the amount fine. In other words, if there's a delinquency of $100, we shouldn't be having a $600 fine.
Okay.
Eric,
No, I mean, that's a policy preference of the board. If they would like to make that change, we can make that change.
If I may.
Ernie?
I believe the state caps the civil violation to a maximum of $600. It won't be set by us, it'll be set by a magistrate if we proceed civilly. So we're not requiring a $600 fine. In fact, the magistrate could choose to levy a $25 fine, but $600 would be the maximum.
Thank you. And I'll also point out, it says not to exceed. So practically speaking, management would be also involved in, I guess, requesting a fine that's relevant, or is it completely up to the judge?
We'd have a role in a hearing before the district justice, and there we would perhaps advocate for a certain amount, but it'd be totally up to the district justice.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kramer, any follow-up?
No, that's my concern. I think that it should be amended.
Okay, Commissioner McComb?
I'd come out slightly differently on this. I'm looking at the penalty for failure to obtain a registration. It's in H sub 3, and it's a fine the amount of $30. Eric and I had an online discussion about whether that was the appropriate amount, and I agree that that's a good starting point, subject to the township's ability to revise it upwards if we're not seeing the necessary deterrence effect, because we've talked a lot about enforcement in the township, and Eric, I applaud you for coming forward with this. I like the idea of having, no deficiencies before certificate issues. That's good, but I think if you're not seeing the results that you want, then I would encourage you to raise it upward. And with respect to Commissioner Kramer's comment, I think it's up to $600. I think there's some discretion in terms of what the township would ask for. I think we want to maintain some flexibility. There are probably circumstances where $600 is the right amount. There may be circumstances where it's not, but I think that's something that can be worked out within your discretion and as appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McComb. Other committee members with questions or comments? Commissioner Bernhardt?
Yeah, just without piling on, the concept of saying not to exceed 600 is something that's common in other type of statutes. One I would imagine Commissioner Kramer may be familiar with, like the Unfair Trade Practices Act has up to treble damages, and it becomes discretionary. Also note here, this is not to exceed 600 per violation. So violation number one, the court may say, all right, I'm going to hit you with $50. Oh, this is your second time, now we're at 100. Your third time, albeit all could be the same amount, there may be some other reasons that are out there. So I wouldn't want to cap us on a floor. We're capped by statute on a ceiling. So while I appreciate what's behind the comments that Commissioner Kramer suggests, I would not support that as an amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, do any members of the public in the room have any questions or comments? Seeing none, Jody, do any online participants have any questions or comments? Okay. I will therefore move that the committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners that we authorize the Township Secretary to advertise a public hearing and notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the code of Lower Merion Township, Chapter 138, Taxation, to provide for uniform enforcement of business registrations and penalties for failure to secure a business registration under Chapter 138, Article 2, Local Service Tax, Chapter 138, Article 3, Mercantile License Tax, and Article 4, Business Privilege Tax. To amend the filing dates in all articles for consistency and to provide for uniform enforcement of registration and license provisions, to allow the collector to extend the filing deadline under specific circumstances, to allow for the imposition of civil fines under all articles, and to amend Chapter A 167 fees to include fees for business registrations under Chapter 138 Taxation, Articles 2, 3, 4, to include penalties for failing to obtain a registration and or license under Chapter 138 Taxation, Articles 2, 3, and 4. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bernheim seconds. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor so indicate by raising your hand. Any commissioners who wish to abstain or vote no? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, the motion to advertise with intent to adopt passes unanimously. And our final agenda item for tonight is for the approval of additional staffing in the Parking Services Department, and it has been previewed that there will be an effort to amend this. And so I will call on our CFO, Eric Traub, to tell us more.
Simply, this is followed from the budget workshop, adding the 7th meter attendant as soon as possible in 2022. That's basically what you're voting on. So go ahead and move forward.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments on this item, which we did discuss at length a week ago in the budget workshop? Seeing none, I will move. Are there any public comments in the room? Seeing none, are there any public comments online? No. Seeing that there are not, I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners the approval of the hiring of an additional parking meter attendant in 2022. Motion's been made and seconded. Excuse me, motion's been made. Second. Is there a second? Commissioner Courtney seconds. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously, and I will not turn it back to President Sinai just yet. Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. As I indicated at the outset of this, I'm going to move to add an item to our agenda, and I think this entire process requires a two-step procedure. The first is actually to add the item to our agenda, and then the second would be to deal with the item. So I'm going to move that we add to our agenda this evening to add 3 positions in connection with our Public Works Department, namely a full-time driver and 2 full-time laborers, as had been discussed during our Public Works shop meeting of last week. The refuse collector annual salary is at $57,146, and the refuse drivers would be at $61,917. With the benefits that each receive, the annual first-year cost is $80,004 for each of the refuse collectors, for a total of $160,008, and the annual first-year cost for the refuse driver would be $86,684. The full first-year cost for that position would be $246,692. So again, first, I move for this committee to add onto tonight's agenda the addition of those 3 positions. Anybody wish
A motion has been made. Is there a second? Commissioner McKeon seconds the motion to add to tonight's agenda, so that becomes item 5. Commissioner Bernheim is, okay, so that motion's been made, so all we're voting on, are there any comments? Are there any comments by committee members on the motion to add to the agenda? Vice President Gabbard.
Just have a question. I know there was one other position we had talked about as well, which was a building inspector. Commissioner Bernheim, is there a reason not to include that, or is there a potential to amend the motion?
Well, to your second question first, somebody can, amend and tack it on. Maybe the single-purpose rule might apply, and we would not want to do that. The reason that I limited this motion to just these 3 positions, those are the 3 that I recollect that we discussed for the immediate need now, and those were the questions that I asked of our Public Works Director about doing this, without taking up any time. So I had not thought about adding on the building inspector one way or the other. My only request is that be done separately, given the needs expressed by our Director of Public Works.
Thank you.
Other committee members with questions? Commissioner Churchill.
How many votes? Is it 7 plus 1?
Look to Madam Secretary to answer that question.
8 plus 1.
Majority plus 1, right.
Okay.
9 votes necessary in order to add the
Item
to the agenda, which is the subject of the motion. Again, the motion is not about the content of the agenda item, but just to add it. Other questions or comments from committee members? Questions or comments from members of the public? Online, Jody?
No.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries, so we now do have item 5 on the agenda. And so, Commissioner Bernheim, do you want to make a second motion?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Funny you should ask.
And all motions by definition are specific. So.
Yeah. I would like to make a motion to consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners the approval of hiring an additional full-time driver and 2 full-time laborers for the Public Works Department, as discussed during our recent budget workshop and as outlined in the memorandum supplied to us by our township manager of August 30th, 2022, for the amounts that I just stated previously.
Second.
Motion seconded by Commissioner McKeon.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Stevenson.
is it too late to offer a friendly amendment?
A motion's been made and seconded. You can move to amend, yes. So it is not too late.
I move to amend that we add to the gentleman's original proposal, the housing inspector position.
Second.
Yeah, well, if
So
I
I
may.
think the answer, well, you've been asked about whether you want to accept it as friendly.
Well, you would then have to go back and have yet another motion to add that to the agenda, similar to what we just did for these 3 people. One of the reasons that I was also separating this out when Vice President Gavin asked about it.
I totally understand. I respectfully withdraw.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. Questions or comments from committee members on the motion? Question for our township manager. Can you comment on this? I know we discussed it at length in the budget workshop a week ago. My recollection is that it was not at the same level of interest in having it be something which the hiring would occur immediately as opposed to waiting until the new fiscal year.
That's correct. We did not get clear direction that you wanted to move forward with this particular hiring as opposed to what you did express with respect to the parking position. That's why it was not placed on an agenda at this point. It was simply instruction to staff to include it in the 2023 budget.
Okay. Do you believe the Public Works Director, who's not with us this evening, because I guess he didn't anticipate this coming up, would welcome this?
I'm quite certain the Public Works Director would welcome this. It would give him a chance to get these additional personnel and see if that relieves the burden that he currently experiences as he has to constantly pull people out of the Highway Division in order to pick up trash.
Great. Okay, thank you. President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Dawes. I could probably, my comments were going to address some of the things that you said anyway, or you asked about anyway. So I think I recollect this a little bit different than Manager McNeely. So the items that were on the agenda for the parking enforcement position, really, there was very clear and I think very emphatic support for that getting done immediately by the board, because we had discussed it in this board several months prior, and I think we'd all had the sense coming out of that meeting that we had given clear direction that we wanted to get it done ASAP. It came up in front of the budget, and we were like, well, why are we considering this for 2023? We thought that we had already done this for the remainder of 2022, and we gave that clear direction. My sense, and the rest of this board can weigh in if my sense is wrong, was that when we had our budget discussion last week and we realized, as it was brought to our attention, that we also need these public works positions, the general sentiment was, well, we should do those as soon as possible as well. And there just wasn't the same emphatic response, in part because it didn't come up that way, in part because we hadn't had a previous meeting about it. But so now it's been added to the agenda. I kind of have two philosophical general concerns about it. At the end of it, I come down in favor of supporting this. I think one thing I think about is our obligation for public notification on this. Right, we put things on the agenda so people are aware, they can comment on it. We did discuss it last week. We will have a full week's of notice here, and it is again. An item just for remaining of the year that we were just considering for putting on next year anyway, so we're just accelerating it. So I confess to not being overwhelmingly enthused about that, but I see my way to it. And the second is I think we want to be just careful about spending off cycle, right? I mean, I think we want to have a budget and we want to be disciplined with our budget. And I think the message that I heard last week was that we have a bit of a crisis in public works in terms of pulling people from other departments. And crises demand a little more immediate responses, and we fortunately have a process that allows us the flexibility to do that when a crisis demands it. And that falls into this falls into that category for me. That's how I see it. But anyway, thank you very much, Commissioner Zoff.
Thank you, President Sinai. Other questions or comments from committee members? Excuse me?
I just wanted to follow up if I may. Sure.
Before you do, I'd like to fully endorse what we've heard from President Sinai. It's there's the public notification aspect, and spending out of the budget, off the budget certainly can be done, but it should be rare and unusual. And in fact, to add to an agenda is rare and unusual. I can find my way to also supporting it, but it's something that we should always consider rare and unusual. President Bernheim.
So at the risk of being redundant, but first I want you to know, I did talk with our Director of Public Works, Paul McElhinney, about the need of doing this immediately, and he doesn't endorse the concept. But secondly, as I stated at the outset, when I asked the questions during the budget workshop of the timing, I was remiss in not following up to make sure that this was on the agenda clearly, as was the position for the parking service. So it is unique that we do this. Procedurally, this is something that we rarely, if ever, do, and I hope that the rarity of this continues. But I also think this falls into the category that regardless of how much timing we give it, nobody's going to object to it probably. And while we should never make that supposition, this does fall into the position that if we're just waiting a couple months when the need is now, that this becomes the exception to the rules. I said, and I take blame for not being clear during the questions of the budget workshop, so we find ourselves in this position. So I hope we can support this and move on. Thank you.
Okay. We will blame Commissioner Bernheim for this rare and unusual occurrence. So we've had comments from committee members. Are there comments from members of the public? Jody, are there comments from any members of the public who are on Zoom?
There are none.
Okay. Jody, do you understand, do you have the motion, do you have any questions on the motion since we do not have it printed in front of us?
I do not.
Okay. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that motion carries unanimously. And so with that, I will conclude the business of the Finance Committee this evening. President Simon.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. With that, we return to our remaining committee meeting for this evening. That is Building and Planning, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have 9 items on our agenda tonight. In case there is anyone here for number 3, the waiver request for to have open containers at a Villanova University cookout. That item has been withdrawn, so if any of you are wondering if you can drink in the Villanova area, you're out of luck tonight. Also, unless of course you're 21 or older. Also, number 7, about 1400 Mill Creek, we will take that in turn, but there is going to be a motion to table that till next week, so just advance notice for people on that. We will start with item number 1, the authorization to release funds held in escrow. There are 6 of these on the agenda. Are there any commissioners who would like any of these considered individually? Seeing none, I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-5 of the Township Code for the following: 331 Penn Road, Maybrook Development, escrow release number 8 for $40,000. 47-65 Cricket Avenue Development, escrow release number 4 for $34,854. 230 Pennswood Road, Church of the Redeemer, escrow release number 5 for $19,118. 1344 Montgomery Avenue Holy Child School at Rosemont, escrow release number 7 for $22,990. 23 City Avenue French International School, escrow release number 2 for $84,700. And Suburban Square, escrow release number 3 for $576,994. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavrin. Are there any commissioner questions or comments on any of these? Seeing none, is there any public comment on any of these? See any online for this? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously amongst the commissioners present. So thank you. Item number 2 is a resolution authorizing appointments to the Ardmore Initiative Board of Directors, and this is on page 21 of our agendas. I am going to go ahead and move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to appoint Peter Crabill to the Board of Directors of the Ardmore Initiative. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Commissioner Kramer. Are there any commissioner questions? We do have Mr. Doyle available if anyone has any questions or comments. Please, Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I'm really excited about the nomination of Peter Crabill to the Ardmore Initiative. I think he'll be a fantastic addition. I had the opportunity to speak with him recently about Ardmore Initiative and other topics, and I think that I'm glad that you're going to be working together. I think it'll be great. And I'm excited. I think there's a wealth of talent in Ardmore among the residents and business owners, and I'm excited that Ardmore Initiative is availing itself of these talents, and I hope that you continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this matter? Jody, is there anyone online?
There is none.
Okay. Let me know, we did receive one written public comment from Micah Sneed of Ardmore, who wrote in opposition to the appointment, and Mr. Sneed's comments have been circulated, provided to every member of the Board of Commissioners in advance of the meeting. Anything else? I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously amongst commissioners present. The next item, as I said before, item number 3 has been withdrawn. The next item on page 26 of the final agenda, the license agreement for the Cynwyd Heritage Trail extension, and I am going to call on our Building and Planning Director, Chris Leswing, to offer some comments.
Good evening. Trails are hard. Trails require a lot of patience. What we're seeking approval tonight is authorization for the township manager to enter into a lease arrangement with PECO, allowing a small deviation of the Cynwyd Heritage Trail to go onto their property as the trail leaves the SEPTA right-of-way and enters into the ballast station parking lot. If anybody's been to ballast station, there's a lot of catenary poles, there's a lot of wires, and as we're doing a rail with trail in this section, so there's a lot of existing infrastructure. As the Cynwyd Trail extension meets the interface with the parking lot, there's just things to get around. The trail has to narrow, and it was getting very constrained. PECO has property right there. They've been very patient working with us, so this easement would just allow a little bit of deviation onto their property to allow the trail to continue through. It's taken many years to get to this point. I am happy to report that I think this is the final step necessary. We have funding in place. We have the SEPTA agreement. Now we'll have the PECO agreement. Hopefully after this evening, the project will be able to be put out to bid. We'd expect construction to be able to begin next year, and it's about a year-long process. And it's about a third of a mile extension of the Cynwyd Heritage Trail from Cynwyd Station to Ballast Station.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone have any questions or comments on this, including questions for Chris? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? Oh, I see none. Jody, anyone online?
No one.
Okay. Let me then move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Manager to execute a license agreement with PECO to permit a 200-foot long section of the Cynwyd Trail Ballast Station extension to extend over the PECO Bala Cynwyd PECO substation property. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Anything further for Commissioners? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously amongst commissioners present. Thank you very much. The next is the certificates of appropriateness. There are 5 of them. Are there any commissioners who would like any of these to be considered individually? Seeing none, I am going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following certificates of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at the meeting held on September 6, 2022. 429 Berkeley Road, Haverford Station, Historic District 22-18, approval to install a driveway in front of the residence. 542 and 544 Barrett Avenue, Haverford Station, Historic District 2219, approval to install 2 driveways, one in front of each twin residence. 542 and 544 Barrett Avenue, Haverford Station, Historic District 22-20, approval to construct 2 mirrored rear additions, one on each side of the twin residence. 421 Berkeley Road, Haverford Station, Historic District 22-21, approval to replace stucco and horizontal wood siding on the home's facades with horizontal hardy lap siding with corner boards of dimensions not less than 1 inch by 4 inch, and to replace window trim with hardy trim. and 49 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District 22-22. Approval to install a new entrance door and gooseneck lights with external conduit over the existing awnings in compliance with Secretary Interior Standards 9 and 10. Conduit to be tight to the top of the awning, painted to match the awning fabric with any additional hidden lighting not to be attached to the cast stone facade, and with wiring to enter an existing penetration on the side, with a subcommittee to review final lighting products. Thank you for the presumed second, Vice President Gavrin. We have Mr. Pritchard here. If any commissioners have any questions or comments on any of these matters? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on any of these applications, any of the 5? Seeing none. Do we have anyone online? Nothing online. Greg, we're making your evening easy so far. So I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is on page 42 of our final agendas. This is this concerns approval of the Historical Commission application for St. Charles Borromeo Seminary. And I'm going to ask Greg if you'll make a short presentation about this.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Commissioner. All right, well, this it's actually an application that was before the Historical Commission back in February and March. It hasn't been before the commissioners since May of this year, but we have some updates, and I think we've come to a place where we can recommend an approval. So the Historical Commission's recommendation was split into 6 distinct parts. We categorized the different kinds of modifications to the property, including removing freestanding statuary, alterations to various parts of the buildings, and items including stained glass windows. The commissioners back in May wanted to rethink some of the aspects of that application, including carved elements on the buildings and the stained glass windows. And we arrived at a recommendation that's somewhat revised. For one thing, the removal of religious iconography, kind of the general term religious iconography, has been changed to simply crosses from carved elements on building facades. That's for the retention now of 2 of the elements that were discussed in depth earlier this year. And then number 5 on the list, the removal of religious iconography from date stones has been removed. Those elements are now proposed to remain. And finally, the stained glass window item on the list has been revised. It will now be, with the exception of those with non-religious patterns, and as well as the window above the main entrance of St. Martin's Chapel. And I'll show some images. This is the kind of full survey of the site as prepared by the applicant's architects. And the photos I'll show very quickly are just a representative sampling of the items to be removed or altered. And there are just so many, there are too many to go over in a short time. So again, number 1, removal of freestanding statuary and other grounds features. Elements such as these, the Commission recommended approval of all of those. The removal of crosses from gates and fences. Again, the removal of crosses from carved elements on building facades. And as an update, these 2 items, the inscription in the entablature above the entrance to St. Martin's Chapel is to remain. Also, the bust depicting Mary and the bishop's crest below the bust are also proposed to remain now. The removal of rooftop crosses is still on the list. Again, an update, the religious iconography on date stones are all to remain. And the stained glass windows are the most complex item on this list, and this has led to a lot of discussion. There are 40 windows in the lower campus, which is kind of the newer, larger group of buildings, and then 43 in the upper campus. This is the type of documentation that the applicant provided to us. Photos of each of the windows from inside and outside, and then drawings showing what their proposed replacement windows would look like in terms of fenestration window panes. Here's another example showing a paired group of windows. You can see the kind of typical religious iconography that's found on many of these windows. There is a kind of unique circumstance. There are 2 windows on the narthex doors for St. Martin's Chapel. These would be replaced with kind of a simplified design, reminiscent in fenestration to the existing windows, but without the iconography, without much of the ornamentation. Now, some windows with geometric patterns and those with no religious iconography will not be removed as of now. There are some examples pictured. And also the large stained glass window above the main narthex entrance of St. Martin's Chapel will now also remain in place. This is kind of the major window visible from Wynwood Road in a very prominent location on the campus. Many of the other windows are along the sides of the chapels and other buildings, and this is really pretty much the most prominent large window on the campus. So again, a survey of those stained glass windows to be relocated to the new campus, windows to be removed and reused at other Catholic institutions, and those without iconography to remain in place. So this is just a survey of that for the upper campus buildings, survey for the lower campus buildings. And then just some percentages. So the number to be removed to the new campus, comes out to about 31% of the windows. Those to be removed and reused at other Catholic institutions, 48%, and then those to remain, 21% of those within the campus buildings.
Greg, can you repeat those 3 categories?
Yes, so the first is those to be relocated to the new seminary campus at Quinn and Mercy University, 31%. Those to be removed and reused at other Catholic institutions, they calculated at 48%. And then those to remain where they are in the buildings on the St. Charles campus, 21%.
Thank you.
Now, the seminary's architects have begun to conceptualize what the replacements for the stained glass windows would be. This is a conceptual rendering showing what an exterior window, a new window with a film over the glass how it might appear from the ground. Here's an enlargement of that. Now, at their March meeting, the Historical Commission formed a subcommittee to review the final design of these replacement windows, including the application of a film or a figured or diffused glass in place of clear or stained glass. So there's still some details there to work out with the applicant, but this Historical Commission subcommittee was specially formed with that in mind back in March. So we feel confident that they will be able to work with the seminary and their architects to find a solution. If for some reason they can't come to a consensus, they could always return to the commission and then back to this committee at a future date, but we think we're on the right track. That's all I have.
Okay. Thanks very much, Greg. So we're going to take comments and questions from commissioners, but before we do, let me just say, it's apparent from that presentation that there's been a lot of work put into this, the consideration of this matter. This is kind of a novel thing for us in having to decide what historical artifacts stay and what are going to go. So before we talk about the merits of this proposal, I just want to thank various people who've done a lot of work on this. And forgive me if I miss anyone, but I'll start with the members of the Historical Commission and their consultants. Greg, your work, the representatives of the Seminary who've worked on this, and then Vice President Gavrin, thank you, and President Sinai and Commissioner Whalen, also the ward commissioners over this area. So again, we can now have the conversation, but regardless of whether this is acceptable or not, there's been a lot of work, and I think it's important to recognize that. So, having said that, we will now take questions and comments by commissioners. After all, I was going to say there is no. Vice President Gavrin,
Is now a
please.
good time to start with a motion? Or
If you would like to,
Yeah,
sure.
I'll start with a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following application. 100 East Wynwood Road, Wynwood, St. Charles Borromeo Seminary, Class 1, 2022 R5. Various alterations to buildings and the site to decommission the property by removing religious items and architectural elements contributing to Catholic liturgical life as detailed in items number 1 through 5 in compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards as indicated. Number 1, removal of freestanding statutory and other grounds features, Secretary of the Interior standards 1, 2, 5, and 7. 2, removal of crosses from gates and fences, standards 1, 2, 5, and 7. 3, removal of crosses from carved elements on building facades, standards 2 and 9. 4, removal of rooftop crosses, standards 1, 2, 5, and 7. And 5, removal of stained glass windows with religious iconography, standards 2 and 9, with the exception of those with non-religious patterns and above the main entrance of St. Martin's Chapel, which was identified as SG1C. I know I went through that pretty quick, Greg. This is mirroring what Greg had on the slide. Greg, could you put that slide back up so everyone can see what this motion is? So it's essentially the motion that Greg talked about as amended. That is what I just read as the motion.
I will second.
Great, thank you very much.
And Greg, is this motion this way acceptable to the seminary?
That is my understanding. The representative is present tonight if they'd
Okay,
like to
well,
comment.
in a moment. Thank you.
So
Do you have anything else to say? I'm sorry.
For the most part, I'm going to reserve my comment until after we hear from the seminary and others.
Okay.
But I do just want to echo you in thanking the applicant and their attorney in working with us, and thank the other members of the board and Historic Commission and Greg as well for all the hard work. This was not an easy application. We're kind of matching up our historic ordinance and one of, if not the most historic building in our township, on the other side with canon law of the seminary. So you have it's a really interesting case here, but I think we came to a compromise that works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I would like to do is, if the applicant wants to say anything briefly, and then we'll continue on with any other questions or comments from commissioners. Sir, if you would just identify yourself and then.
Sure. Matthew McHugh from Claire Harrison, attorney for the seminary. I'd like to echo a lot of the comments and thoughts here. We appreciate the work of the Historic Commission, Greg, Commissioners Gavrin, Sinai, and Whalen in meeting with us to come up with this revised application. The motion as framed by Commissioner Gavrin is acceptable to us. And I'll note, as Commissioner Gavrin also noted, that we had this difficult task here of complying with canon law, which the seminary is guided by, and then also the township's historic ordinances. And I think all parties kind of put where they could have dug in and worked towards a compromise that allows the seminary to effectuate its mission, move some very important historic pieces to its new campus, but also preserve a lot of important historic elements at the property that weren't able to be relocated. Things like the carvings, and some of the stained glass windows that didn't have iconography on them. So we're here. We also have our historic architect, Jenny Gwynn, who has a representative sampling of the replacement window, and we're happy to answer any questions or address any comments that anybody might have.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank
Okay, if you would not fully sit down, but
Sure.
we'll see what.
I'm around.
Okay, thanks. So we will now turn it back to commissioners. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Commissioner McComb, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross. Yeah, I would commend everybody for the progress that's been made. This is something very different than what we saw the last time before, so thanks to all. Just a basic question. I assume that this proposal takes into account whether the feasibility of being able to do these removals without damaging any underlying structure, because lots of them are old and fragile. So I'm assuming that at some point the Historical Commission, the Seminary, and all involved took a look at that.
That's correct. As part of the diligence of even preparing the application, any of the work is going to be done by extremely skilled laborers, people who are, especially when you're talking about the building replacement issues, those are all going to be done in order to preserve the integrity of the building and whatever historic elements are remaining.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yeah, thank you. If you were kind enough to bring a sample of the replacement windows, I'm okay for show and tell.
Okay, ma'am, will you come up to the microphone and identify yourself, and then you can go ahead.
Hi, Jenny Gwen with Beyer Blinderbell Architects. We're the Historic Preservation Consultation Architect for the Seminary. The sample we have is specifically related to the new glass with the film applied.
You probably have to stay with the mic. Great.
You can pull the mic out.
I'll just use my trusty assistant here. So this is the proposed glazing that was, it is an IGU, so you can see it's an insulated glazing unit, which will go back so that it's a thermally improved condition. And then this is the film. Last time you all saw just the actual film. This has been applied. This would be applied to the inside surface of the glass, and so this is what you would be seeing from the exterior. You can sort of see my hand. And the concern that the Historic Commission raised and why we went to the film is that in the evening time, sort of the glow that you get when you're looking at a window as opposed to being able to see through the clear glass. And we have held this up to light, and it does effectuate that sort of transparency, but translucent quality that you get with a stained glass window behind the clear glass that's there now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Any other commissioner questions, comments? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So I want to echo what a number of people said in thanking all the people who worked incredibly hard on this, including the Historical Commission, our building and planning staff, Mr. McHugh, a really impressive historical team from St. Charles Seminary. I had the opportunity to take a couple of tours, and I have to say it's a really terrific team that was assembled, but especially the colleague to my left who really took this entire thing on and did a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the board, and certainly for the ward commissioners who represent the residents who live right around this, to have Vice President Gavrin really take the lead on this and really move the ball forward a lot. I think we're all very, very grateful for him. So just one quick question. So the crosses on the fence, which have been a subject of some discussion of what removal looks like, where did we end up on that?
I believe the recommendation and the preference that was cited to us was the entire cross would be removed.
Excellent. So by way of background, a previous iteration of this just basically had the crosses de-armed, right, and you would end up with a spike. And while any removal of any element is a shame, this one I think was more aesthetic and certainly true to the construction there, and it's a very good outcome. I think the other outcomes are terrific. We're preserving the stonework, as Mr. McHugh said. These were things that couldn't be taken to a different site, and therefore they are kept here as opposed to erased, and we don't have a faceless person on the side of the building. And we're keeping more windows. We're keeping the non-religious windows, and we're keeping the main window in the front of the chapel. And the ones that do get removed get reused. And I think that's an important element here. And as was mentioned before, this tension between canon law and the township's historic code meant that there's kind of this tug of war that ends up happening over. It's not really clear where it would play out, and I think we kind of ended up where we could. I will say, one of the things that came up the previous time we talked about this, and Greg, maybe you can come up and pull up a photo that I sent, right? There's a discussion of the stained glass and what happens in lieu of the stained glass, and there was a comment that, well, the stained glass isn't so important from a historic perspective because it's not really visible from the outside. We didn't really have any pictures, and this is what it looks like from the outside. Right? From the outside, stained glass during the daytime looks like stained glass. It does not look like clear glass. Right? I'm willing to accept that stained glass with saints and other religious iconography on it are things that I understand why the Catholic Church is going to take with them. But I don't think we should be under the illusion that from the historic perspective and the historic envelope of this building, that stained glass is something that is not an element. It clearly is invisible from the exterior. The next picture is the window from the front, and I will say the picture in the packet is much better than the one I snapped on my camera. So you should just look at slide 44 in your packet, and Greg, maybe you bring that one up instead. I'm delighted that we are able to retain this window. That's the one. Because it too is impressive, not just from the inside, but from the outside, and is clearly the most prominent stained glass element on this building from the exterior, and it's wonderful that we're keeping it. But all this goes to say that I think as we go forward, we need to continue to maintain discipline on what the replacement for these elements are, right? And that is why that element is important. But let me conclude by just thanking everyone who worked so hard on this. I'm glad we brought it to this spot where we actually have something that I'm happy to support. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Brett.
Thank you,
President Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo that I think it was important that we were able to maintain the building itself. There were some elements that in the original recommendation, it was sandblasting away different elements of it. And I think as you get to the integrity of the building, that's a problem. There was one area where we did allow that, which is above 3 of the doors, there are shields. 2 of them have crosses inside the shield. It was explained to us that for the seminary, it was very important. These are entryways to the building. Having a cross above it kind of indicates that this is a religious building, which it will no longer be. And not only that, but one of the 3, for some unknown reason, actually, from every party, one of the 3 shields did not have a cross in it. The other 2 did. So removing the crosses from the other 2 kind of creates symmetry with the 3rd one. So it was a situation where that's the one area where it did make sense in my mind to actually alter the building itself, to create that symmetry or allow that symmetry, and also respect the canon law there. Similarly, with the removing the crosses for the gate, it was something that I wish we didn't have to do. Again, it was explained from the seminary standpoint, these gates are entrances to the site. Having a cross at the entrance to the site, again, indicates that this is a religious building, which it will no longer be. To me, that was very compelling. And again, as President Sinai said, just removing the arms didn't make sense. Removing the entire cross made a lot more sense to us. In terms of the replacement for the windows, there's one thing that hasn't been brought up. When we originally looked at these replacements in the film, as we saw, it's kind of a clear film. Mr. McHugh had indicated in some conversations previously that there is an opportunity for colored film on top of it to potentially recreate some of the effects that come from stained glass windows. I'm not at this point going to opine on whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense to do that. I'd rather, as we're remanding this to the Historic Commission, kind of have them go through whether that makes sense to use various colored films along with the clear film to make this kind kind of create the impression of the stained glass without creating a false impression that that's the original historic element of the windows. Again, I can't say whether it is or is not, but I implore the Historic Commission to look seriously at whether we should have color films. What should be the sizes? Should they be different sizes of blocks within the windows to help, again, recreate that feel of the stained glass without creating a false impression that this was the original stained glass. So the Historic Commission still has some work to do. We're well aware of that, and I'm sure that, you know, what we've seen from the applicant so far, they will be willing to work with the Historic Commission in a constructive way, and vice versa. So again, thank you to the applicant. I hope that this board is supportive of this compromise, and I'm excited at where we turned out. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions, comments? Seeing none. Okay. Is there any public comment on this matter? Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When you're doing your motion, could you clarify if you're just remanding the issue of color film to the Historic Commission, or if it is the complete replacement? Because the replacement window had been previously approved in the subcommittee of the Historic Commission, so just
okay, thank you. I mean, the motion's been made. I think this is a detail. I mean, if I understood what you just said, this is a detail that will be worked out with the Historical Commission. So, thank you.
I think we can refine the parameters there with them.
With the Historical Commission.
With the Historic
Thank
Commission,
you.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. You're welcome to have a seat, so since we're a public comment. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Kathleen Avenell, here representing the Lower Merion Conservancy. Like everybody before me has already said, the work that this board did, in particular Commissioner Gavrin, who really led this effort, Commissioner Whalen, Commissioner Sinai, it's hugely appreciated from the Conservancy. I don't think that I, in my experience, living in Lower Merion, have ever spoken before a board that's been more receptive to issues of historic preservation. And for that, I thank you all. I know that Commissioner Gavrin, at least, and Commissioner Sinai have had conversations about this building, and I know that you dug into it. This was a really difficult application, unprecedented for Lower Merion. And when I first saw it, my head spun. You know, I didn't know how to think about it. But I know that a lot of members of this board really did their homework in trying to understand canon law, what it means for township law. So that's what, you know, I'd like to just give you my grateful thanks for all of the work that you've done. It's just been really impressive. I'd also like to say that I do appreciate that the changes that were made with some of the other conditions of approval or recommendations, which would include maintaining the date stones and the inscription on the entablature, which I know that Christian Bush particularly favored, mostly very much in favor of maintaining that. And then also the bust of Mary, which we had a lot of conversations about. You know, the work that you've done has been just really outstanding. Greg also, and the rest of staff. Having said that, I do continue to believe that the process for this application is flawed. We might come to the same conclusion as one that went through the sort of traditional route, which would be an application that came from an applicant requesting modifications to a building, usually for rehabilitation purposes. This was very different. That applicant will be coming along shortly. That would be Mainline Health. And in the case of every application that's come before this Historical Commission or this board, Historical Commission or board, prior to this, those boards are looking at whether those changes are necessary to accommodate rehabilitation. And there's always compromise. You think about some of the churches that have been repurposed here. there's always been talking about whether this stained glass window can meet the needs of a residential project. And sometimes it can, sometimes it can't, but there's compromise and there's discussion about that. In this case, this building will never make it to there because the windows and some of the other elements, historic elements, are coming out before the Historical Commission and the applicant can actually ever have a conversation about whether some of these elements could be appropriate. So the Historical Commission at the end of the day could come, if it went through the route that it normally goes through in Lower Merion, they could come to the same conclusions that the Historical Commission came to most recently with this, which is that we don't believe that the windows, the removal of the windows diminishes or impacts the integrity of the building because they're on the other side of the building. They're not close to the area of public view. They don't have the same kind of impact on the outside as they would have on the inside. But again, those are questions that should be reviewed, in my opinion, following the process that we usually take with applications that come before the board. So my qualm isn't at this point with what's been taken out, it's the process for getting there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with public comment on this? Is there anyone online?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. So I am then going to call the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. So before we move on, I just want to say two things on this. First of all, in response to Kathleen's comment, speaking for myself, I hear you. I've thought of some of the same things about the process here, which it has been somewhat, hate to use the word unorthodox with a religious building, but it has been. But I think that the compromise and the agreement that was reached in this unique situation have kind of, in my opinion, have make the means justify the end justified the means, because I don't know if we had done this a different way, if we had gotten there. But I thank you for your comment because I think you're right. The other thing is that I would just note for people here and anyone who's listening, this is really kind of 50% of the process here because this building has been sold to a new owner who is going to develop it. And I think that what we've seen tonight and with the efforts of the last several months are how much this township and this board cares about what goes on with the historic artifacts on this property. And I think there is going to be possibly a greater challenge than removing artifacts is finding suitable ways to redevelop this property that is in furtherance of its preservation as a Class 1 historic resource. So that's my roundabout way of thanking people for their work and saying that we've got plenty more to do when the time comes. And they're all enlisted to keep helping with it. So moving on to the next matter. This is, we're going to deal with number 7. This is the conditional use approval and final land development plan for 1400 Mill Creek Road in Gladwyne. And I am going to make a motion to table this matter until 1 week from tonight for a special building and planning committee meeting. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I'm sorry, did I not do that correctly?
Not to a building and planning committee.
Oh, Board of Commissioners.
Board of Commissioners meeting. Okay, I apologize. So I will amend that motion to say that we will table it till a Board of Commissioners meeting 1 week from tonight. And I assume you still second it. Thank you very much. I don't believe there's discussion on a motion to table or public comment, so I will take the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We will now move to number 8 on the agenda, which is in page 110 of the revised packet. This is concerns a preliminary land development plan for 111 Presidential Boulevard. And I see, Jillian, I see you up there, so why don't you take it away?
Thank you. As you said, this is a preliminary land development. The board last saw this at the late spring. It is for the property at, sorry, let me go to full screen here. It is for the property at 111 Presidential Boulevard in Ballackinwood. The subject property is approximately 9 acres. It is located along Presidential Boulevard. It backs up to multifamily development at 191 Presidential Boulevard. And there's also an unimproved right-of-way called Glen Road, which is not an improved road to the rear of the site. It was developed as a commercial office building in 1981. Currently, it is in the process of de-leasing. The applicant's proposing to demolish the existing building and various improvements on the property, and to construct a 5-story mixed-use building containing 25,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space and 425 residential units. The proposal includes 676 structured parking spaces in a wrapped parking structure, and the installation of streetscape improvements and a public gathering space. Since the Board of Commissioners last saw this application, there have been a few changes. If you remember at the last meeting, the applicant agreed to designate 5% of the units, which are 24 units, for moderate income, and 5% of the units for workforce housing. The applicants worked with the township to identify a trail location in the rear of the property. Glen Road is shown to be improved up to the location of the building entrance. The design of the public gathering space has advanced with comment from both the county and the township staff. And a mid-block crosswalk has been studied and shown on the plan. And I have here an image of a preliminary location of the rear trail that would extend from the public gathering space and traverse up a hill, and then would lead then to the trails located on the West Laurel Hill Cemetery. The applicant is still talking to the adjacent property owners and working with township staff to identify the final location of that. Staff has been working with the applicant for many months on the architecture. We have conditions that are included in the approval, which seek to reduce the number of materials and increase the usage of brick along the primary front facade, correspond material changes to changes in plane, and to increase the emphasis of the building corners and projection of balconies along the front facade. We have reviewed these recommendations with the applicant, and they are amenable to them. They have been working also with their architects to show the changes so that we are on the same page with that. So I'm going to provide you with some of the renderings that have been provided to staff. Here is the floor plan for the proposed building. The portion of the building colored in orange are commercial elements, which are fronting on Presidential Boulevard. There are light blue are building amenities, and you can see the yellow are apartments that are wrapping the other portions of the building. As I said, the applicants provided renderings. This is a view of the top is a view of the building from the access drive, which is kind of located mid-site. The bottom image is the building as you would be viewing it with the public gathering space in front of it. And there is a keynote at the top, so this is a portion of the building that would be facing the public gathering space. And moving around and down the building along Presidential Boulevard. As I had mentioned, one of the recommendations from staff and the Planning Commission was to investigate a pedestrian crossing. That crossing has been shown on the preliminary plan, including the location, and studied by the applicant. Another condition that was added during tentative sketch was a requirement for the applicant to work with their landscape architect to provide a reforestation and removal of invasive species along the rear of the property, which slopes significantly down. And as I had mentioned, the applicant has been working with staff for many months on the design of the public gathering space, and we feel as though it's significantly improved from the design that was provided at tentative sketch. So that is my very quick presentation, but I'm available for questions. And the applicant is here, and I believe they do want to say a few words if necessary. They accept the conditions as proposed.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Jillian. Before we take questions or comments, why don't we just to expedite things, if the applicant has anything, you don't have to, but if the applicant wants to say anything briefly, you're welcome to, and then we'll make you stand up there in case commissioners have questions for you.
Thank you. Good evening, Denise Yarnoff on behalf of the applicant. We actually don't have anything to add to that, but just want to thank the staff, the consultants of the township for all of the time and the hard work that's been put into this to get to the point that we're at right now. And as Jillian stated, all of the conditions are acceptable to the applicant.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, commissioner questions for either the applicant or for staff? Commissioner Bernhardt.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. On previous occasions, I voiced my concerns about this project with its size and primarily its impact on traffic in the area, and my view of the traffic studies that in questioning whether they actually complied or not. I'm not going to revisit that specific inquiry, but some of the questions and comments I have about the conditions that are here, that theme will come up. It's not the only issue that I have, but there are a couple. So if what I can do is go through a few of these conditions and raise some questions about it, I might appreciate that, and whoever would want to reply could reply. Condition number 28, which by itself is an objectable. It says the applicant shall work with staff on the design and location of bicycle racks. I only point this out because along Presidential Boulevard at the moment is the bike path to nowhere. Right before Luxor, and you drive past that, you could stare at all those great commercial properties there. And then you go all the way up to the start of 191, and it ends. Evel Knievel would not ride a bike on that roadway. So if you're going to have bike racks there, it's for something that's internal. But here are a couple of other substantive questions. Jumping down in order here, number 33, which talks about gathering space, also provides, it says, applicant shall market and host a minimum of one public event per month and coordinate such programming with township staff in City Avenue Special Service Districts at the public gathering space. Now that sounds all nice and well and good, and that somebody's willing to do that. I mean, is that going to be monitored? I mean, do we really want to decide what that public gathering is? And, if it happens or it doesn't happen, is this just some voluntary act? And I have absolutely no idea where we get the authority to even ask this question, of them to do this. So I just find that odd. If someone later wants to comment, feel free, but if somebody objected to that, I would understand it. The next section, 34, says, the applicant shall use good faith, commercially reasonable efforts and employ a range of strategies, including lease incentives, to populate public retail, which is the defined space, with food, beverage services. Who's monitoring that? Who's making the determination of what this good faith is? This is something I believe that we need an answer to before we go forward. I don't think we have the right or the ability, as much as we'd like to see retail, to be able to impose something upon it, because it then states if 1 year later they're unable to do it, and that will be controlled by the market, not by us, then they can go ahead and utilize it for commercial use. So what's the game plan between that, or during that 1 year period? What's actually supposed to happen? If someone can address that at some point, I'd appreciate it. And let me just run through the others. 44 states, if applicable or required, ADA compliant crosswalks, etc. What's the difference between applicable and required? Don't we have, isn't it just a matter of required walks? I don't know what if applicable would mean.
Commissioner Bernhardt, forgive me for interrupting, but do you prefer, this is up to you, but we could get answers to each of these individually.
Fine, I'd be glad to do that.
Because you're asking some good questions. I don't want them to get lost in the shuffle.
I'd be glad to do it one by one. So we can hit the reset button and go to the...
Yeah.
That's where it starts. Yeah.
Hi, Adam Harmon, on behalf of the Hanover Company. I will answer your questions to the best of my ability. Obviously, Jillian is here to provide additional feedback. So the first question I note was on condition 33 relative to our hosting a minimum of one public event per month in the public gathering space. That was a condition requested by the township staff. And I agree that kind of an odd thing, to request. We proactively agreed to that willingly for the following reason. That is a public space. The public is welcome to use it. It does not require our programming. There are other conditions that speak to requisite dedications and set-asides to ensure that that space is accessible to the public during reasonable times and subject to reasonable rules to promote safety and the quiet use and enjoyment of our project. However, to help encourage activation of that space, we agreed to host a minimum of one event per month, and I believe the condition itself speaks to us coordinating that with the City Avenue Service District and also to publicizing it, whether it's through their advertising means or on our website. We're accustomed to being proximate to these types of civic greens and public gathering spaces and other developments. We're our own property management group as well, so we have experience in hosting those type of events. So the intent of that condition and the intent of us agreeing to it would be to help welcome the public. We're not going to be the only one activating that space, but once a month, whether it's a Saturday morning yoga class or a Thursday afternoon wine tasting or a movie that we put up on an inflatable screen or a talk that we have a local professor come give, we want to help provide those ideas to make that space usable to the public. Relative to your questions on how is that enforceable and how do we do that, I'm going to defer to the township on that. It's something that we're going to do because we're going to live by the conditions, but I can't speak to the enforcement side of it.
Well, if you all are comfortable with it, fine.
We are.
I'm not going to stand in the way of that. It just struck me as something that I don't know that we have the authority to impose upon you.
And I respect that, and I appreciate that. But it is something, I do think this is an important component of this project, and it's not something that we take lightly, so it is a responsibility that we're happy to undertake. The second question was regarding the good faith efforts relative to the retail, and you hit the point directly on the head. And just to be clear, this is the tiny sliver of retail immediately adjacent to the public gathering space. It's not the rest of the retail space. It's very important to staff that we try our best to get food and beverage in that particular sliver, so that if you're there at the park reading a book and you want to grab a cup of coffee, you don't have to walk to the other end of our project to do that. And so we've done this in other projects. We're doing it right now in a project in San Francisco where the strategy, and we tried to craft the condition with as much flexibility as possible to recognize exactly what you said, which is the market controls this more than the township, more than us, more than anything else. It's the invisible hand of the market that's going to determine what ultimately can happen there. But we want to signal to the township our commitment to being flexible, to getting food and beverage there. So we have a range of ideas. Number one is to set it up as an outpost of a larger retail food and beverage location on the other end of the site. We've done that in other locations where we say, hey, that's great, but as part of your lease for this other space, during the morning and lunch rush, while this park is being used most frequently, you need to have someone there. If it's a coffee shop selling, croissants and drip coffee and bottles of water in that space. That is something that is an easy exercise, easy extension of an existing retail, and it's something we've done before. It also allows us to provide lease incentives to induce a retailer that might not otherwise be able to afford to be in the project to be in that space for a more compelling rent number. You want to make sure that the retailer has skin in the game, so to speak, that they're invested, so that they are. It's not free, but it's something that we may be able to further incentivize someone to take that space. And then finally, it doesn't just automatically default to commercial space. That is an option if nothing else works, but that condition requires us to talk to City Avenue District again to think about what might be possible there. And the first thing would be pivoting to a non-food and beverage user, some user that may only need a small sliver of space, like a bike shop doing repair work or selling custom bikes, or a high-end pet store next to, some of the open space in the area. So I think there are a lot of avenues there. And again, I'm not going to speak to whether or not it can be enforced, but we think it signals our good faith efforts to work hand in glove with the township to try to make sure that not just the public gathering space, but the retail space immediately adjacent to it is successful and viable. And the final question you had at this point was relative to the, if applicable or required, relative to the ADA ramps on the crosswalk. I agree, that's probably redundant language. Pick the one you want. It doesn't matter to us. We were literally on a call, and I think someone wrote applicable /
Right.
So
Right,
whatever works for us.
Right, I didn't know if there was any difference. Maybe we just clean that up unless somebody has some difference. So don't go too far away. So the next issue I had was on item number 63, where it talks about a redacted annual report of the origin / destination commuting zip code data of employees and residents shall be provided to the township. What's actually in the mind there?
And it's not my mind.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Sure it's not.
Let me take this one, Commissioner Bernheim. The Township Commissioners, a couple years ago, passed a transportation demand management policy. We were one of the only communities in the state of Pennsylvania to have one. That policy seeks to reduce single occupancy trips. The number one thing that people complain about with new development in the township and existing development is traffic. Our goal in working through this with the TDM policy is to better understand where people are coming from and where people are going to. What we have discovered working working with some of the new development that's occurring throughout the township is that when a prospective tenant of a development comes in, they have to submit an application and they point out where they work. That work has a zip code. So you know where somebody's going. That's the destination data. And also if you're commuting somewhere and you're working at one of the stores, you have that information where your employees work. The idea is to gather that information, those zip codes, match them up to transit facilities within the region, and determine if it's practical that a certain amount of employees could take mass transit. Now, if everybody's commuting from Wilmington, Delaware, and there's no direct connection from Wilmington, Delaware, it's not going to work. But if people are commuting from Wayne, if people are commuting from Conshohocken, and we're seeing clusters of that information, what this ultimately might do is support a shuttle service or bike share service in the City Avenue district that reduces the single occupancy traffic. This one development isn't going to make that happen. But you'll also see that same condition in the other development that's coming forward tonight. We anticipate this happening with other development up and down City Avenue. I would expect St. Charles, when they come in, and Mainline Health, when they come in later for a zoning change, perhaps for new development on St. Charles, that information could be provided. Also, St. Joe's University, we've had preliminary conversations with them about that same information. We could potentially, at the township level, have a very large set of data for a significant amount of the City Avenue district that we can use to support and analyze if that shuttle that we all think would help to reduce that single occupancy traffic could happen. So it's just that reporting that would be coming back, and that's the data to support the township's transportation demand management policy.
Well, I can appreciate how some of the data, as you outline it, might help drive some decisions for getting public transportation, which currently doesn't exist for that area. What I can envision is how you're going to say to the resident, well, excuse me, and where are you going? How you're going to collect this data, how we would expect that the developer, the owner, is going to be able to get this data for us to use. Those are difficult hurdles that I have trouble with. And again, it's what we can do to impose this as a requirement.
Well, this will be a condition of approval for this development, and it will be an annual report that comes forward with the origin and destination data. This is data. This is something that everybody knows where your residents are employed, right? When they submit that data, now jobs will change, but what we need is big picture, right? We're not worried about every single car trip. We're looking for patterns. There may be patterns that say the vast majority of people here are commuting to Conshohocken. That would certainly say that they could be commuting from the Wissahickon transfer station, which is right down at the bottom of a Pencoy. If you can get a shuttle And I'm pretty sure we could find a way to work to get across that private bridge to the Wissahickon train station, which is right across Main Street, without having to get up and go through all of the spaghetti up on City Avenue and Route 1. We could have that way of taking those cars off the road. And imagine that. We could take 15, 20, 25 cars coming from this one development that might be commuting through Gladwyne and Penn Valley to commute to Conshohocken and put them on a shuttle and put them on a train.
Yeah, well, two things, and I'll move on. One, there's the element of the Big Brother is watching aspect of this, which bothers me. And the other is that this is going to dovetail back to my earlier comment that I said I wasn't going to make. The number of car trips in and out of here, I have difficulty with as to whether it's compliant with our requirements or not. But let's then jump to number 64. This talks about the applicant shall work with the township to install parking meters on on-street parking spaces along Presidential Boulevard. And each time I've discussed this project, I've noted that I drive this almost every day. And as I drove by on my way out here this afternoon, the thought of trying to get parking spaces there, and then the next number, 65, it talks about utilizing short-term loading and unloading on Presidential Boulevard. Unless you're going to double that road on that side of this, that to me is just outright dangerous, if not ridiculous. I'm not sure. Pick either one, but I don't see a third option how to classify that.
Again, we're balancing multiple, somehow I'm up here, so I'll take it.
Yeah, go for it.
We're balancing multiple goals with this. There's the goal of calming traffic. One of the things that we hear through all these developments is on Presidential Boulevard, for people that live there, they don't feel it's safe to walk down the street. Traffic's going too far. You can't cross it. They live on a very busy expressway, right? So you're trying to calm that traffic, and at the same time, you're trying to ensure that vehicles going through the district can move forward in a orderly way. If somebody's, say, commuting to Penn Valley from Philadelphia, right? You want to be able to make sure that their commute is working very easily. So in here, the purpose of the on-street parking is to help with the traffic calming, right? So the on-street parking provides the ability for people who are coming for short-term pick-up and drop-off at the retail that we're trying to have to be successful in this district, and having parking right in front of retail is one of those things I think all of us can recognize. If you can get a place right in front of the place where you're trying to go, you're much more likely to go there. So we're thinking that this would be high turnover on-street parking. That idea of on-street parking helps to make the people on the sidewalks feel much safer, and it also helps with the traffic calming, that people aren't necessarily excessively speeding. They would be more likely to go the speed limit going through that area. It's also done in conjunction with the mid-block crossing. There are people that have come to the meetings who live directly across the street that have said, it would be great if you put a retail space across with a food and beverage place across the street from my house. How can I get there? Do I have to walk all the way up to City Avenue across at a signalized intersection, or is there a way that we can get across? So these things working in conjunction together should work out. Ultimately, this needs to be approved by PennDOT, and I can, Joe certainly, the township's engineer here, can expand upon that. But the idea of balancing the ability to improve walkability, traffic calming, and at the same time moving traffic forward. Remember, a few years ago, when Presidential Boulevard had been 4 lanes and was turned to 3 lanes, there was a lot of concern that Presidential Boulevard just wouldn't move at all. And many of those fears didn't come true.
Depends when you drive on it. It really does. I mean, 20 minutes to get from City Ave to Belmont, that happens. So what's the expansion of that road to accommodate this on-street parking?
It wouldn't be going from, right now, it wouldn't be the existing cartway wouldn't be changed. It would be extended into the development site, right? Because this is a redevelopment. So all of that on-street parking would take place from the existing curb back into the project.
Right. So the actual current road width would not be altered. All the parking would be interior to the current road width. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? And the concept is that not that it's needed to meet the number of parking spaces, but purely this calming mechanism to help.
The humanizing of the
because you're going to have that crosswalk there if people would want to use some of the hopeful retail space that would be there. Right?
Because we're reinforcing it. We're changing what's there today. And this is very hard. And Jillian and I have had many conversations with residents in the City Avenue district. We've really tried to do a lot of outreach and talk to people in 191, the Corinthian, Sutton Terrace. It's very hard for people to imagine what's going to happen when you start to have a critical mass of some of these buildings there. Right now, people who live in many of these buildings experience it that you drive in, you drive out, and you don't walk. You don't walk in those neighborhoods. What we firmly believe is going to happen when there are these retail spaces, these open spaces, there are now going to be destinations that people walk to. It will be a completely different environment, and we need to design it to support that environment.
Understood. Thank you. That certainly educates me for a bit, but I still think it's just a high dangerous area to have on-street parking. And I apologize for usurping so much time on this, but I can't resist this one. Number 86, strategies to enhance bird-friendly design. I guess it's not to get Eagles fans, it's something else. But.
This was a recommendation that came from our Environmental Advisory
Ravens
Council.
fans.
Okay.
Briefly, please, because
You need to comment on that.
Happy to strike it. It's really more applicable to high-rise curtain wall glass buildings.
Right.
So
Which
the
is what I
building
thought, right.
Yeah, the building itself is bird-friendly.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Grimes, thank you very much, and I apologize if I took more time than I should have.
Yeah, no, not at all. Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So Commissioner Whalen and I were just looking at a couple of these the conditions of approval, 51 and 53. 51 states the applicant shall be responsible for snow removal on Glen Road, and then the frontage to the trailhead at the terminus of Glen Road. And then 53 is any work proposed within the Glen Road right-of-way requires separate approvals and permits. But where is Glen Road?
So Glen Road is located to the rear of this site. There is a kind of a stub of improved area of Glen Road, and the rest of it's unimproved. Prior to the construction of the expressway, it was a road. We looked at historic atlases. It seems like it led to Pencoed Ironworks.
Is it a paper road now then?
Yeah, so I guess the way Gil had described it is just, would be categorized as an unimproved township right-of-way. It's just township property, it's not a road.
Okay.
The portion at the top that leads to our sewer station is a road. So what this would be proposing is kind of a turnaround area, a bulb at the bottom. And Public Works has reviewed this, and they've requested that the applicant provide snow removal, and the applicant was accepting of
Agreed to do it, right. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zelov, I think you had.
Yes, Commissioner Grimes, I do. Thank you very much. This is for staff. So we've had some discussions recently, meaning in the last 6 months or so, about empty commercial space, particularly in the City Avenue district, right around the corner from the proposal in front of us, the Luxor.
Yes.
So we've had some conditions of approval recently in tentative sketch about the need to have the commercial space leased and some better efforts to do so. I'm looking for that condition of approval because it should carry over from tentative sketch, right? Because it still is applicable in preliminary plan.
Yes, it could be carried
I
over.
do note in condition of approval 34, which has been explained, but it only applies to a small commercial space abutting the public gathering space. It doesn't apply to all the other commercial space that's at grade in this large proposal. So, is it here and I can't find it?
I don't believe it. I don't believe it is here.
Okay, then is there a reason it didn't carry over? And if it didn't because you just didn't do it, let's add it back.
So I guess what I would say is we have had discussions with the applicant about how they would be marketing the retail spaces. I don't think it would hurt to carry it over if that's what we want to do, but I do think the applicant can talk about their leasing process and how they do that in-house as a management company.
So I would ask staff to find that COA from tentative sketch, because I'm not going to try and recreate it.
Yes.
And so that we can, then I can have a motion later this evening to add it into preliminary plan.
Okay. Well, Adam is saying he doesn't recall there being one from tentative sketch. I'm going to, I can take a look and verify, but the gist of it was that the applicant would provide a retail study and a marketing analysis for the retail space. Is that your recollection?
I'm not sure it
yourself?
went that far.
Okay.
Or was that, I don't think it went in that direction.
Okay.
But I don't want to have a debate. I asked staff to find it, and then if you know, the committee can debate it once we
Yes,
find it.
we'll do that.
Thank you. That's all I have, Commissioner Grimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McComb?
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Jillian or Chris, just a kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Bernheim's questions about the on-street parking. We've been through this, and I now understand the point of it, and I agree that it's a good idea. We're going from changing what's basically an expressway to something that's walkable. So it's unusual and it's going to be different, but I think it's ultimately going to be really enhancing the area. But the question is, and we've had discussions before, that stretch down Presidential from St. Anne's, it really, people do get head of steam, and I'm not looking at Commissioner Bernheim and Commissioner Grimes as they commute in their sport cars from Penn Valley. People do come flying down there. And my question is there, and this isn't something we're going to look to the applicant for, but the idea of sort of signalization on a crosswalk or something even farther up by 191, because I know the 191 residents have had real concerns about being able to pull out on a Presidential on a right-hand lane because people are going so fast. So that's something just to put into the mix for future consideration. But I think a crosswalk without some sort of visual cue it could be dangerous.
If there is a crosswalk, it would have a light. We would have to do that. And it's one of those things that we've been also looking at the Ardmore master plan. And if anybody has gone out into Ardmore recently, there's a wonderful ice cream place called 1900 Ice Cream. It's a little shop. It's kind of too small. It doesn't have parking in front of it, and it's right on Lancaster Avenue, right by the signalized intersection. Very hard to get to. And there's lines out the door. It's even busy in February. And from that, I've developed a taste for ice cream. So I do bike rides in the evening, and I stop by, and there's a furniture store that has lots of furniture. So I sit there and eat my ice cream cone, and I watch the signalized intersection. And you'd be surprised the level of activity. I think we all think that it might, oh yeah, you know, a couple times an hour. It's like literally every other minute on an evening, that light is used. When you have places for people to go, people will use those, and people do stop. There's the occasion, yes. There are people that will go through it or not respecting it as fast, but those signalized intersections work, and that's the kind of thing that we would like to have. And what we would also do, and we've spoken to the township engineer about this, we're seeing Presidential Boulevard from City Avenue now to St. Asaph's, a lot of development going along there. There's a lot of development coming in at the same time. We want to be able to put in and make improvements, and this is something we're going to come out of this, coordinated development so these things aren't one-offs. There's a pattern that drivers, as they get into this section of roadway, are dealing with. Because those blocks are very long. When you go to the City Avenue District, one of the goals of the City Avenue District that this board approved was reducing the size of the blocks in City Avenue. They're designed for cars getting off the expressway. They're not designed for people walking. If we have people living there, we want people to walk, we need to make shorter blocks. That's what those crosswalks do. But they will all be lit, and will be, I think, and as will be coming from this, there will probably be a more coordinated study. I think the development just got ahead of us, but I think we need to come back to that over the next couple of years and coordinate those, to have a sequence of developments, particularly as what's happening with One Belmont, what's happening with the Tishman property. I think we can do that because they all have that large frontage along the way.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I have just a question about condition number 46 on page 113. This pertains to the maintenance of specific trail sections, and I'm concerned specifically with the phrase toward the end of the condition, well, mid-condition, that says the township shall be responsible for the maintenance of the remainder of the trail located off the applicant's property. We don't have any property there, so I'm wondering exactly what that's referring to. And then I have another question after that.
Okay. So this property, and I apologize, I don't have the graphic up, but this property with Glen Road used to extend all the way down to the Pencoid Landing before they built the expressway.
there's a series of very interesting walls down there, things that you wouldn't have built today that are just really interesting. It was part of River Road came through there too. River Road, before they built the expressway, used to extend through Cynwyd. It actually came out, if you've ever been to West Laurel Hill Cemetery, and there's a lower gate closer to Pincoid Landing. If you go across there, there's a driveway. That driveway was actually River Road, and it went around, but they took it out where the expressway was, and it came back around to this property. Some of that infrastructure is still there. It's really, really neat to hike on, and that's the area that we're looking to open up for this trail going in. The applicants looked at this to find a way to incorporate some of that to get a trail to go up to West Laurel Hill Cemetery so people can walk down. It won't be a paved trail, but it'll be a walking trail because it's incredibly steep through there. But it'll be walkable, and it'll provide a way that people don't have to go all the way around the block, but they can directly connect to West Laurel Hill Cemetery and then walk down to Pincoid Landing or walk over the Cynwyd Heritage Trail. The applicant has concerns about if the property is on somebody else's, if the trail would be on somebody else's property. Just the old way that these properties were laid out, 191 has a tail of property they didn't even know they had that went down to the expressway. It would require an easement over their property. Working with the applicant, as part of their recreation requirement, will build this trail. That will be the cost of it, will build it. They will annually supply the township with money to maintain it, but we will be the maintenance entity. It's more of a liability issue for them. But we don't imagine the Parks Department will be doing this. We think by that time we'll be working with our friends at City Avenue Special Service District to be able to do that. There are trails developing in City Avenue along Rivers Ferry Road, some other elements. There will be funding in place. We will find the right entity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Related to the slope design,
Could I
yes.
rudely interrupt and follow up? That's not how this reads. The way it reads, it says, "The township shall be responsible for the maintenance of the remainder of the trail located off the applicant's property." Responsible for the maintenance seems to indicate financial responsibility. There's no limitation on that. And then located off the applicant's property. Would that include 191's property, West Laurel's property?
The easement is there, but I believe, I don't have the condition right in front of me, but I believe at the bottom of that easement that the applicant will make a financial contribution.
Read the next sentence. That shall be clearly defined and included in section 47.
Why don't we go back, Commissioner O'Neill, you have the floor. I'm going to just suggest if anyone else has follow-ups.
We can come back to 46. I may want to make an amendment to, just to update the conditions there. But getting back to the potential trail system that connects, and you had mentioned, Chris, that it's potentially steep slope. I'm curious about whether, because of that slope, will ADA requirements be triggered on a slope that's steep? I think not, but do we need to triple check that just to be safe?
And that's what the applicant has been doing through this process of working with a local trail designer. Jake, you're much more familiar with that than I am.
So
Excuse me, sir, would you identify yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Jake Denny. I'm a developer with the Hanover Company. In trying to figure out how to construct this trail that has great value to both our residents and the overall community, it went beyond Hanover's typical expertise. We construct multifamily residential and mixed-use buildings. We are not a trail engineer. So we found a local trail expert, Penn Trails LLC. They literally wrote the book on these type of trails in Pennsylvania, and we retained them for help on this project. They've identified, took meetings with us and with what the township was asking for, which was a hiking/mountain biking trail that you could traverse in both directions. Was unlit, but provided that connectivity. Took that and translated that into U.S. Forest Service standards for unpaved off-site trails, and that's what we have put into our application. What our final plan will show a full maintenance plan on, and the resulting trail is not ADA compliant. It is not intended to be ADA compliant. It will have slopes up to 12%, but that does allow for hikers and for bikers to go in both directions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. And my very last question, and you just kind of mentioned it, and that is the maintenance agreements are very important to us, to me personally. And I'm just curious about Are we still looking to inspect this every other year? Once the certificate of occupancy is in, we automatically go to an every other year inspection plan as a part of the maintenance agreement, property-wise?
I'd have to look at the maintenance agreement, but that's standard. It usually
Good,
is every
okay.
other year.
I thought so. I just
I mean,
wanted
this
to
is big.
double
We would
check.
treat it like an
Perfect.
open space preservation.
Great, okay, thank you, that's fine.
If I can provide additional information for Commissioner Bernheim's question?
Please.
Looking at your agenda at the top of 114, where condition 46 rolls over, there's the sentence reads that the applicant shall provide an annual maintenance fee to the township in the amount determined by the applicant and verified by the township staff and township engineer for the cost of maintenance of the trail.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Okay. Any other commissioner questions, comments? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So just briefly, if I put this down on my computer, it's going to like hit all the keys. I just wanted to follow up on some of the previous comments on items 34 and 35, which are really about the public gathering space. I thought this was really interesting that this was in here, and I don't have questions, I just have comments. One of the concerns I think I have felt for a long time, and I've heard echoed from other board members, is this sense that we're getting development but not good enough development, right? And I think the activation of the public gathering space that gets provided was one of those elements that we thought of as being a key element of good development, right? So we've gotten these public gathering spaces just sit there and nothing's happening in it. And so if we have these conditions in here that are voluntarily accepted by the applicant that are basically a commitment to activate the space because it's in the township's interest, it's in the applicant's interest, and it's what we want to see out of this area, I think that's terrific. I mean, I don't think we should dissuade that. I don't think we should deter that. I think we should encourage that. I'd love to see more of that. I'm delighted that applicants are willing to make a commitment to try and have a vibrant community space in this area that we're trying to make more vibrant. And I think that is an excellent thing in there. And I think it's especially enlightening that the applicant clearly recognizes that it really isn't just what the market determines, because you can put lease incentives in to get tenants that you want. And I'm not so worried about the tenants on the 22,000 square feet of retail that are in this building. I have every confidence that if you're building 22,000 square feet of retail, you have every intention of tenanting it well. And certainly any thoughtful applicant, of which Hanover is clearly one, recognizes that the tenants in their main building are going to accrue to them in terms of just the rents they're going to collect on the units above it. It's part of what's making an attractive building an attractive amenity. It's a whole enchilada, right? But what's going on in the public spaces don't necessarily accrue to the rental income in exactly the same way. I think it's useful for the township and correct for the township, if the applicant agrees, to say, look, we'd like to spur you to do more and commit to doing more, because the benefit that accrues to everyone in the township and not just specifically to the property. And I'm grateful that we have an applicant who clearly recognizes them. I do think this is different from the Luxor. Right? The Luxor was developed as an inwardly focused building, right? We forced them to have some glazing and a streetscape on it, but honestly, it's a building with a courtyard, and they develop the courtyard as the amenity, and they have every expectation that their residents are going to be inside in the courtyard and not out in the street. That's not what this building does. The inside of this building is a parking lot, right? This building puts its residents on the street and puts its residents out to the public gathering space. I think the question with the public gathering space is not whether this applicant can put retail and activity there. The question is, really, are people going to gather there, right? I mean, I think that's the part that we don't know, whether this particular corner in this location is going to attract people. But I think this is a terrific approach to our streetscape into these public gathering spaces. And I'm delighted to see it. I have long bemoaned that I wish we had more high quality development in the township. This is a big project. Like, don't get me wrong, it is a really enormous project, but I think it is a high quality project that is signaling that it wants to be a participant in the community, and I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Okay, I have just one or two points myself. Going back to conditions 64 and 65, these are the ones about the parking meters and the on-street parking. Forgive me, you may have, I think Chris may have touched on this before, but let me ask again. These are things that are up to the township, installing parking meters and on-street parking spaces. Why do we need the applicant to include, why do we need to include those as a condition for the applicant?
So so we're working with the applicant to ensure that they are metered spaces. We want them to be metered, so there's revenue from them. It's one benefit, but also so there's turnover on these spaces. We don't want somebody just parking there all day. Sorry.
But let me just say, I'm not questioning the need for it. I'm questioning why we need the applicant to agree to that, because this is regulating streets.
Well, I do believe this portion of the property, and maybe, Joe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe this portion of the property is inset, so it is slightly off the road. It may extend outside of the township's right-of-way on that roadway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more concerned, and I don't want to dwell on this because it's getting not late yet, but we're getting there. But I'm more concerned with precedent that in other projects, I don't know that we ask for the adjacent property owner to agree about meters and things like that. And I'm more concerned with this, asking the applicant to agree could carry over to other projects. Now, I guess I'm seeing, Chris, you're not agreeing that my concern is valid, and you can feel free to say that. But
I think we're showing our math. There's a certain amount of coordination that took place with the mid-block crossing, and the idea is that this is a different idea, right? This is going to be a change to this block. There's been a lot of conversation between staff and Public Works, staff and the parking department, a new space for on-street parking. I think we were just making sure that you were seeing that we put this all the way through. Certainly, if it needed to come out and wasn't on the, if it is completely in the right of way, you're absolutely correct. It's a township piece. I think it's just important to show that we've looked at the entire idea of that. Yeah, certainly can come out, but I think it's sometimes we do show you our math, how there's a lot of different elements that go into making these elements.
okay, yeah, thanks. My last question: are there public restroom facilities with the public gatherings place?
Not to my knowledge.
So this project is kind of set apart from some others. I mean, and this certainly isn't the only building in that area that we're talking about with public gathering space, but we're asking the public to come for one event a year. I mean, excuse me, one event a month, and we have a trail. Do we envision when nature calls what they're supposed to do? And it's kind of a funny subject, but I think it's a question.
I mean, a good question is, a comparable public gathering space that we hope this is as successful as is what takes place on Suburban Square. Suburban Square doesn't have public gathering spaces, or doesn't have public bathrooms, right? Suburban Square has private bathrooms. You have to go in and buy something to go use the bathroom. These are those this isn't a commercial district. This is a public space in a commercial district. There will be, if you're downtown or if you're in one of these environments, you go into the coffee shop. Or there are also going to be many people who live here. There's actually a lot of people that live within walking distance of space. 191 is a very large building. There are a lot of residents in that building. The Corinthian is a very large building. There are a lot of residents there. The Luxor, once again, big building. They're very close by too. So if you're coming and you're coming to the space, it might be one of those things that if there are movies and events, working with the City Avenue Special Service District, very easy to put in temporary bathrooms and stuff. I hope we get to that point where we're doing movies and events and we have to bring in those kind of facilities to work on that kind of programming.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a conversation that's not particularly for this project as opposed to a concept. I do think, Suburban Square has a Starbucks. But I also think that to rely on private businesses for this sort of thing is not, or else saying only people who live close by should use this gathering space is probably not where we want to be. So having said that, just thank you, just to move on, because I don't want to dwell on that tonight. I'm going to make a motion, and I'll just say I'm going to make the motion. I have one change to a condition that I will propose, and then I think if there are others, I'm going to entertain those as well. So I'm going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a preliminary land development plan for 111 Presidential Boulevard in Bala-Cynwyd. The plan dated May 25th, 2022, last revised August 26, 2022, prepared by Bowler Engineering, shows the demolition of existing improvements on the property and construction of a 5-story mixed-use building. The proposed building contains 425 residential dwelling units, 25,564 square feet of ground floor commercial space, and 676 structured parking spaces. The plan includes public gathering space and streetscape improvements. And with the conditions, I'm going to suggest that in condition 44, we change that to read, ADA compliant crosswalk and curb ramps shall be provided on Glen Road as required by law, period. Preliminary grading and/or spot elevations are to be provided for feasibility of construction. So, is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Are there any commissioners who wish to propose other amendments? Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. I have a couple I'd like to propose. The first is in reference to condition 63, which talks about the reports of the origin and destination. I completely appreciate what Chris Lesswing has explained to us of what the use of the data would be for, and that's a good thing, but the ends don't justify the means. I'm troubled with both the process and the potential intrusion of information in order to get that, and I submit that there are other ways to get similar information to provide the data that's necessary to make determinations, since this isn't just related to this one property. So I would move to delete paragraph or condition number 63 as the first motion.
Second.
Okay, I'll take that as a friendly amendment. I'm looking at the applicant. There's no issue there. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. What?
Okay. All right. So then the next amendment that I would make, and again, while I completely appreciate the concept behind it, I also completely disagree with it. And that's this idea of on-street parking that is going to enhance calming. I think it's going to have the adverse impact. If you have meters and you have deliveries that are there, people need to come in and out. That is going to make more congestion, more problems, and I think it's going to make it less walkable, not more walkable. And so I would seek to eliminate 64 and 65. I think what we heard about the crosswalk area and how that's going to be developed, that standing on its own would be better served to help enhance the walkability of this area.
So respectfully, I am not going to recommend that as a friendly amendment. So I think we need to consider that. So I take it you may have others, but we should probably do this.
Well, then let me see, if there's a second, and if so, then we could vote on this one, solely.
We're looking, is there a second?
Makes me feel at home. No one agrees. Okay. So, all right. So I appreciate that, and those are the only amendment that I have. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other commissioners who wish to propose amendments? Commissioner Zella.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. As the staff found the condition of approval from tentative sketch that was approved at that time.
So the condition of approval from tentative sketch stated the applicant shall work with staff to ensure that the streetscape and commercial space directly adjacent to the public gathering space are activated. Strategies to activate the space may include, but not limited to, designating the adjacent commercial space for retail such as food and beverage, which can spill out into the open space, providing enhanced outdoor furniture along that facade. So I do think that is captured with our current condition that we have about retail. We expand on that requirement. We have on other projects, the project at 355 West Lancaster comes to mind, required a condition requiring the applicant to provide a marketing plan and retail occupancy study for the proposed commercial areas and consider subsidies to ensure occupancy. I'm wondering
That's the one.
Okay.
that I was referring to, yes. The first one, I think, is captured in
I agree.
existing condition 34.
Yes.
I don't seek to amend condition 34, but I do seek to add the second one.
Okay.
So, so if you'll state the second one, I will move it.
If I can just before Jillian goes through that, condition number 98 requires the previous tentative sketch approval conditions to be complied with. So they're already rolled into this. You just don't see them repeated in the agenda. But if you would like to add it again, there's nothing.
Well, I don't need to add it again now that you've pointed out. Is that condition 98?
98, that the final plan,
This condition is not in here. This was on a different project.
It doesn't refer to tentative sketch.
well, it's all applicable conditions of approval. Those are tentative sketch conditions are usually referred to as applicable conditions of approval.
So is it the practice of the planning department to incorporate conditions of approval from tentative sketch and ensure their compliance prior to accepting a final plan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. The condition that I read was not a tentative sketch condition. That was a condition of a project that was approved in Haverford that talks about a retail
So
site.
there's a timing issue. There's been a number of, thank you, Jillian.
Sorry,
There's been a number of mixed-use apartment buildings that we've been considering in the tentative sketch process in the last many months. And so the condition that you found was not incorporated in the tentative sketch here. So I do want to move it, so can you, Jillian, can you read it?
Yes, I can. The
Oh,
applicant,
and before you do, can you remove the word subsidies and replace it with lease incentives? It's a much better word.
okay. The applicant shall provide a marketing plan and a retail occupancy study for the proposed commercial areas and consider lease incentives to ensure occupancy.
So moved.
Is that agreeable to the applicant? Okay, so I'll take that as a friendly
Thank you,
amendment.
Commissioner Grimes.
Okay, is there anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I am going to just preempt, I'm going to recognize President Sinai, but I am going to withdraw my friendly amendment for number 63 and turn it back over to President Sinai to have a conversation, because I didn't realize that he
Well,
had
if
an
it's not no
objection.
longer a friendly amendment, I think the appropriate thing to do is Commissioner Bernheim to actually make the motion.
Well, yeah,
To strike 63.
I'm sorry, but I accept it as a friendly amendment.
And I believe that Commissioner Zeloff, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, I actually did second it before you.
I did.
Before you said it was friendly. So the motion theoretically can be on the floor
Yes,
to
it
vote
is.
just for the removal of 63.
Yes.
Up to you
But,
whether there's any further discussion, I suspect not.
Since I then accepted it as a friendly amendment, I would have not done so had I known that President Sinai wished to make some comments and of which to possibly argue against removing it, so I'm
Wouldn't have
going to
stopped
give
me
it the
anyway.
floor.
Okay.
Yes. We can't say anything in 2 seconds that we can say in 2 minutes, so go ahead, President.
Okay, so I'm not sure, so is this back on the floor?
Yes,
Is there a
it
vote on
is.
this? Okay.
Yes, it
So
is.
I'm going to respectfully take the opposite view. I think, this board previously has supported a TDM policy, of which a fundamental component of it is to figure out the commuting patterns of people who use the corridor in an attempt to make more efficient commutes, right? And part of that is collecting some data, and I will accept that we could use cell phone mobility data to try and get at some of this, right? Which is a substantially greater invasion of privacy than just collecting the zip codes that people live in. But leave that aside, you could track people's GPS signals and aggregate it, and there are vendors that provide it, and it wouldn't be as good. Instead, we're just asking for redacted version of information that typically gets collected anyway, which is what zip code do you work in and what zip code do you live in? Certainly every employer has that, because every employer knows where to send mail to you, right? It's already information that they have. I suspect landlords already have it. If not, they, it's part of their credit check or whatever, a new application. And it's just data that's being collected. The census collects it, right? Because you could get it aggregated in the five-year basis. And so this is just something that came out of our TDM policy that we all previously evaluated as one of the elements of what we're trying to do to reduce the what is going to be rather substantial growth in traffic in this corridor. So I will confess to only having limited hopes that it will have some effect. Having said that, we will have no hope if we don't get the underlying data to be able to help us implement the policy. And I do not think, I just fundamentally don't agree that it's a privacy imposition. And it's important for this policy. So I really hope we do not strike that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the motion on the table is to remove condition number 63. Are there other commissioners who wish to comment on this?
If I may ever so briefly
Please.
respond. I note that the comments from President Sinai were limited to getting data from employers about their employees by having the employers then disclose the zip code of their employees. While that may be readily available, since the employees are giving that to their employer, so for purposes of payment and everything else, it's still, in my humble opinion, is asking the employees to divulge information over to a governmental body. They want to do it voluntarily, they can do it voluntarily, but I don't think we should compel employers to do it. The other aspect, which is the part that I focused my comments on, were residents and determining the residents' origin and destination, where they're going. How is that to be done, and what type of questions need be asked or to gather that information from people in a required annual type of report, which is being redacted. I don't even know what's being redacted other than theoretically names. And I just submit that there are other mechanisms in order to voluntarily get this type of information, as opposed to us imposing a requirement that I don't believe that we have the authority to impose. So that's why I would rather see us get this in another fashion. And I don't want to, beat this any further than I already have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, if I may just add one bit of clarification. As part of this, the staff routinely meets with developers, and we talk about this. Part of this arose from a conversation with the new building going up at Lord and Taylor. We've been meeting with Federal Realty, and they were the ones that educated us that all of these buildings are managed by firms, and they have this data, and they have these zip codes. Much of this data is also sold and transferred anywhere else. The zip code data is out there. It's absolutely anonymous. There is no personal data that the township's interested in. It's only zip code data. This is something that you'll see. It's the essence of transportation planning, is knowing if you're going to link transportation planning to mass transit, to local transit networks, you need to know where people are coming and going from. Our goal is to not know anything about the people, the qualitative, who is, just how many dots on a paper are commuting to where and where from. That's all. And it's just, these are data sets that are readily collected on file. It's just pushing a button and they just sort through it, and it's just the number of zip codes of where people are going.
So the last thing, so then you live there, I can knock on your door and say, Chris, I'd like to know where you work so I know where you commute so I can send that out.
No, you don't have to ask anybody.
Without using your data. All right, okay. I've noted my objection to this process and believe there's another way to get this data. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Whalen.
I think, without getting into the philosophical debates between Bernheim and Sinai, I think I come down on opposing this simply from a practical standpoint. I think that we're talking about something that may, in an ivory tower, be helpful or useful, but in practicality is not going to be meaningful in any way, shape, or form. We're asking an applicant here, this applicant, but again, other applicants, to collect data that maybe they have or they don't have already, so we're adding a burden on them. We're going to ask for that to be complied with and sent to the township. Then we're going to ask someone at the township to spend their time looking at this report and all the reports, and I just have to assume that no one's ever going to look at these reports. And compiling all of the reports is going to turn into a gigantic technological nightmare, and so no one's going to use them. And in the end,
we approved the projects that we've approved, and we've denied the projects we've denied, so it doesn't matter. All of the zip code data doesn't matter. We have traffic studies, as Commissioner Bernheim said. Some of them we put a lot of stock in, some of them we don't. But regardless, we have traffic studies, so we already have a method to get the idea of how many cars are on a given street. This is just adding, you know, again, in theory it seems useful, and I think just in practicality it's going to be a big waste of time for everybody, and in particular staff's time when we try to compile all of this. So all opposing.
Okay.
Was there a second?
Yes, there was. Yes. Okay. Any other commissioner, we're going to call for a vote if they're on this motion, if there are no other commissioner questions. I see none. So to be clear, we are voting on, the motion is to remove condition number 63. So a yes vote is to remove it. A no vote is to leave it in, if everyone's clear. So all those in favor, please raise your hands. In favor of removing. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 to 6. The motion. The motion carries. Motion carries. Motion carries. Okay. Right. So now.
Pass 7-6.
Right. Yes, it does. So it's removed. All right. Are there any other commissioners who wish to propose amendments to the full motion? Seeing none, we will now take public comment on this matter. Is there anyone who has public comment? Seeing none, is there anyone online?
I do not see any hands raised online.
That works for me. So we will now call for a vote on the motion as amended. This is the full motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I assume that wasn't an abstention.
No, that was just
okay.
a head scratch.
Thank you. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you very much. We will now move to the next and no pressure final item on our agenda concerning 1 Belmont Avenue in Bala Cynwyd. This is a preliminary land development plan on page 136 of the final packet. Jillian, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a preliminary land development plan for 1 Belmont Avenue in Bala Cynwyd. The subject property is shown here, highlighted in orange. It is located at the intersection of City Avenue, Belmont Avenue, and it's also shares a corner with Belmont and St. Asaph's. The subject property is approximately 7 acres. As I said, it's bounded by City Avenue to the south, Belmont Avenue to northwest, St. Asaph's to the north, and it contains a 12-story office building, previously known as the GSB building. It's currently called the Carbarth building. There's multiple driveways that serve the property, and it's located in the City Avenue Special Services District. The applicant's proposal includes the construction of 2 buildings. Building A is a 7-story building with an 18,000 square foot footprint. It's located at the corner of St. Asaph's and Belmont Avenue. It contains 2,600 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 165 residential dwelling units, and 32 internal parking spaces. Building B is a 5-story building with a 35,000 square foot footprint, located at the intersection of City Avenue and Belmont Avenue. It contains 25,800 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 107 residential units, and a wrapped parking structure with 592 parking spaces. The plan also shows a public gathering space and public amenities as well as internal roadways. So just to orient everyone, the site plan is shown on the screen. The building A is shown here at the corner of St. Asaph's and Belmont. And again, this is the 7-story building with 165 residential units and 32 surface to the rear of the commercial space parking. And Building B is located at the corner of City Avenue and Belmont. It's 5 stories with 25,000 square feet of ground floor commercial area. The applicant has informed staff that they are looking at installing a grocer in that location. There's 107 residential dwelling units and a wrapped parking structure. As I mentioned, the plan shows the construction of a public gathering space, which is located right here between the 2 buildings and along the internal roadway. So since the board last saw this project, the plan has been revised in the following way. There's been a reduction of 6 residential units. The applicant has designated 10% of the units for moderate income. The access points along Belmont Avenue have been consolidated. There were previously 2. There's now 1 that was a recommendation of the township engineer. The design of the public gathering space has advanced to incorporate comments from the tentative sketch plan review. The residential lobby has been relocated to align with the existing office building. And the plans have been revised to show the Belmont Avenue and St. Asaph's Road intersection in different improvement scenarios. And so this is a small public service announcement because there are so many people interested in these intersection improvements. And as we all know, PennDOT is considering a roundabout in this location. That is an analysis that is ongoing. We do not have any updates on the status of that analysis. The last we heard from PennDOT just a few weeks ago was that they are continuing to look at it, and they will reach out to us once they have additional information. However, staff did hold a community meeting in the spring for which there is information on the township website where you can watch the video where PennDOT explains the proposal. So that is there if anyone is interested. We have included a condition for the applicant to continue to work with us as we learn more about what the intersection improvements are that are proposed by PennDOT at that corner. We've also included a condition of approval requiring the applicant to work with City Avenue Special Services District to program and host events within the public gathering space. And I had mentioned previously that the public gathering space design has advanced. It does include a lawn area. So just for frame of reference, the lawn area is about twice the size of the lawn area that's provided at Suburban Square. And the entire public gathering space is, I believe, 17,000 square feet, which is approximately the size of the town square that in King of Prussia, the outdoor amenities located there, just to orient you to what the type of, the size of the space would be. On the screen, we have the ground floor layout. The pink is showing the commercial spaces. And then, as I said, on the upper stories are residential units. The applicant has provided renderings of the buildings. This is the view of the building from the corner of City Avenue and Belmont Avenue. And as you kind of turn the corner, this is a view into the site along the internal roadway with the public gathering space to your right. And as you continue to round, this is Building A, and this is a conceptual roundabout shown. This is internal, showing the public gathering space in the buildings, and internal. The applicant has also provided inspiration images for the public gathering space. One of the recommendations from the Planning Commission was that the applicant consider utilizing additional masonry material and consider integrating limestone color into the palette. Staff has since looked at the architecture and spoken with the applicant. So one of the recommendations that we have is that the Building and Planning Committee may consider requiring the applicant to, rather than considering requiring the applicant to work with staff to find locations to increase the masonry material. And we have spoken with the applicant, and they are amenable to that. So that is my very quick presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant's here, and they are happy to speak to the project as well.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant want to make any quick comments, Mr. Berusman?
Sure. Good evening, George Brosman, representing the applicant. We have our group here. We spent a lot of time with you back in May when we got tentative sketch approval and conditional use. At the time of the conditional use, you may recall our architect, Bob Keene, took you around every facade of the building, and we went over the architecture in great detail with you. And we had even at that time made some changes that were recommended to the Planning Commission. When we went to the Planning Commission on Monday, they looked again at the architecture and they suggested that condition, number 11, and we're okay strengthening that in the way that Jillian has recommended. If there were more questions about that, Bob, the architect, is here, can go over those again, and we can answer any other questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner, questions, comments for the Jillian or for the applicant? Commissioner Zeloff, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Jillian, same question as for the last application?
I did not see that condition included with the tentative sketch.
You did not?
No.
Okay.
For this
So
project.
Commissioner Grimes, I'll, at the appropriate time, after the motion's made, seek to have that condition added, as I
Okay.
did in the prior application.
That's fine. Other Commissioner questions, comments? Vice President Gabbard.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Jillian, condition 11, I was a little confused as it's been beefed up or made kind of more so. It's now, what's in here is it's now the applicant shall consider increasing the amount. Is that right?
Yeah, that's current. That's the language that the Planning Commission recommended.
So how is that more stringent than anything? If they shall consider, right? I've talked about this before. My feeling with shall consider.
So what I'm recommending is the applicant shall increase the amount of masonry.
Okay, so we are saying.
Yeah, I have a suggestion for that, but
Okay.
when you're finished.
And then how about number 12? Again, the applicant shall consider incorporating the use. Are you going to recommend also that shall incorporate the use? Or I don't know if how the applicant feels about that.
Good evening, Pete Sikora, Bizzuto Development. So with that one, it's a little challenging because the name, there a lot of historical references have trademark issues and there's concerns. So finding a relevant name that makes sense for the project can be quite restricting. We would like to consider it, and we go through a whole vetting process and would make that a top priority, but to actually commit to that right now without studying the trademarks and doing the research is a bit challenging because we could get pinched and not have a viable name that makes sense for the project.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion for that one as well?
No, I do not. My services are kind of limited.
I mean, I understand that, and thank you for that. I don't know if it's shall attempt to, right? At least to me, that's more than considering it. So I don't know if I can make that amendment if that's a friendly. Has a motion been made on this
No,
yet?
it has not.
So I won't make a friendly amendment to the motion that hasn't been made
You
yet.
could just hold that in advance.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Since Vice President Gavrin mentioned number 11 and the wording, let me just see if this works for number 11. The applicant shall increase the amount of masonry, reducing the number of materials and utilizing limestone material color that is complementary to the existing office building, comma, and work with staff in furtherance of this condition. Does that work? Okay, I'm seeing the applicant say yes. So at the proper time, I will modify the motion. Before we put a motion on the table, President Sinai, please.
Yes, just a question for Jillian. Jillian, so there's been a couple mentions of the Planning Commission's architectural evaluation on Monday, and I wasn't there, unfortunately. So were there any specific things that they were concerned with? I mean, you mentioned the masonry, but what were the recommendations?
Specific concerns, they were concerned about the use of the color palette. One planning commissioner in general would prefer to see less gray used, feeling that there have been a lot of gray buildings constructed and they may appear dated. That was one specific concern. The other concern was the amount of materials, and I think that's reflected in the condition. The number of material usage, like an interest in a more simple material palette.
Got it. So is there a reason that the condition is written sort of in the general way that it is, rather than a more specific, you know, I don't have a better way of articulating that. Like, well, why doesn't it just say what you just said? But
well, I think it does in some ways. I mean, it talks about reducing the number of materials.
Okay.
I think you could add in there transition of building materials. I mean, I think one of the things that we see a lot with this type of construction is you are changing materials without having a significant change in plane. I think that is one condition that leads to a building kind of looking thin, kind of on the exterior, like thin-skinned. So why the Planning Commission didn't give more specific recommendations, I can't speak to that, but I can say that they have an interest in having materials that are more traditional and have a history of being longer lasting.
okay. So I guess I would just say, if you were comfortable that this condition will get us there, then I trust your judgment. If you think there needs to be some additional wording in there, like you just said, that I'm happy to have you suggest it to me at a point where it would be time appropriate to make a motion, and we can see if the applicant would be agreeable.
I do think that we feel comfortable working with the applicant and the applicant's architect. They have been easy to work with during this process, so I would feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Feel
Thank
free,
you.
if, at the proper time, if you don't think it's strong enough what I suggested.
I'm not sure between now and then I could come up with wording,
Okay,
but
well,
yeah.
okay. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, is that it for your comments right now?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Commissioner Grant.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions, comments? All right, so seeing none, I am going to put a motion on the floor. I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a preliminary land development plan for 1 Belmont Avenue in Bala-Cynwyd. Plan dated July 6, 2022, last revised August 26, 2022, prepared by Bowler Engineering, shows the construction of 2 buildings. Building A, 7-story building with 18,881 square feet footprint located in the corner of St. Asaph's Road and Belmont Avenue, containing 2,674 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 165 residential dwelling units, and 32 internal parking spaces. Building B is a 5-story building with 35,647 square foot footprint located at the intersection of City Avenue and Belmont Avenue, containing 25,844 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 107 residential dwelling units, and a wrap parking structure with 595 parking spaces. Plan also shows the construction of a public gathering space, internal private roadways, and streetscape amenities. And the motion includes an amended item 11, condition 11, which will read, the applicant shall increase the amount of masonry, reducing the number of materials, and utilizing a limestone material color that is complementary to the existing office building, and work with staff in furtherance of this condition. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. That's second. Commissioner amendments, Commissioner Zelloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I would ask Jillian to come and read the condition that you read and that I then moved in the last application. Substituting the phrase including lease incentives.
Yes, the applicant shall provide a marketing plan and retail occupancy study for the proposed commercial areas and consider lease subsidies, lease incentives to ensure occupancy.
So moved, and requesting a friendly amendment.
Okay. Is that condition acceptable to the applicant? He's saying yes, so I will take it as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Anything
Grimes,
else?
that's all I have.
Okay. Vice President Gavrin?
I will propose an amendment to number 12. I don't know how much better it is. I think it's a little better, but seeing how I will never vote for a project that says shall consider in the conditions, I will make an amendment or propose amendment. The applicant shall attempt to incorporate historic names associated with Bala-Cynwyd history for the internal roadways, public gathering space, and proposed buildings.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment. Any other commissioners with amendments?
No
Yes,
amendment, but I just
Commissioner
feel
Burnham.
compelled to point something out. Between 111 Presidential and 1 Belmont, which are in close proximity, don't want anybody to lose sight of the fact that we are dealing with 697 new units in this one area. And it is a lot of congestion, I'm afraid, that we're putting into this small part of Balkan.
And certainly, these are not the only residential units that have been proposed for that.
That is
part of the
correct.
township.
There's others forthcoming.
Yes,
The 15th ward.
yeah. So, any other commissioner comments on this application? Any other suggestions? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? I see none. Is there any public online?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. Anything further by anyone? So I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands, signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Building and Planning Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes, and with that, we are adjourned for the evening.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. There will.
If people can be quietly, we have one more item, tonight's agenda. Just be loud.
You know who you're talking to.
There will be a community meeting regarding the Ardmore Master Plan being held next Thursday, September 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Ardmore Avenue Community Center. All are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that concludes our business for this evening.